June 14, 1998. Michael Jordan had just won his sixth NBA championship. Chicago was celebrating. The world was watching. And in an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, a young waiter named Marcus Williams was about to serve the most important table of his life and have his belief in heroes shattered. When Jordan left that night, there was no tip, not a single dollar on a $24,783 check. Marcus needed that money desperately. His sister was fighting cancer. His tuition was overdue. He depended on every dollar to survive. But this story isn't what you think. It's not about a greedy celebrity or a bitter waiter seeking revenge. It's about what Marcus discovered when he started asking why. A discovery that would lead to a foundation helping thousands, a friendship built on accountability, and a truth that divided the world. Can we hold our heroes responsible for their failures while still recognizing their humanity? Can someone cause real harm and still deserve understanding? Can both things be true at once? What happened that night, and what Marcus uncovered about the worst day of Jordan's life, would change everything he thought he knew about pain, justice, and what it really means to be human. This is the story of one missing tip that became something much bigger. A story about the distance between who we think people are and who they actually are. About trauma and grace. About demanding justice while owing it. And it all started on a humid Chicago evening when Marcus Williams approached table 14. The heat hit Marcus Williams like a wall the moment he stepped outside Giordano's back entrance. June in Chicago could be brutal, but tonight felt especially thick. The kind of humid evening where your shirt stuck to your back before you made it halfway down the block. Inside the restaurant, the air conditioning hummed steadily, keeping the dining room at a perfect 72 degrees. Marcus had exactly 4 minutes left of his break. He leaned against the brick wall, pulling his waiter's apron from his pocket and tying it around his waist. His fingers fumbled with the strings. They'd been shaking on and off all day, ever since he checked his bank account that morning. $243, that was it. Tuition payment was due in 5 days. Rent was due in 8. And Aaliyah's medication, the expensive kind that insurance only covered half of that bill, sat on his kitchen counter like a ticking time bomb. "You good, Marcus?" Denise appeared in the doorway, her own apron already spotted with marinara sauce from the dinner rush. She was 42 but looked older, the kind of tired that came from raising 3 kids alone while working doubles whenever she could get them. "Yeah, I'm good." Marcus forced a smile. "Just needed some air." "Well, get back in here. Chen just sat a party of 8 at table 12 and Ramirez called in sick, so we're down a server." She paused, studying his face. "You sure you're okay?" Marcus nodded. He'd known Denise for 3 years, since he'd started working at Giordano's to pay his way through journalism school at Northwestern. She had a way of reading people that made lying to her pointless, but he tried anyway. "Just tired. Aaliyah had a rough night." Denise's expression softened immediately. Everyone at the restaurant knew about Aaliyah, about the leukemia, about Marcus being 28 years old and responsible for his 19-year-old sister because their parents were gone. "How's she doing?" "She's strong, stronger than me." That part was true. Aaliyah had been fighting for 18 months and somehow she still smiled more than Marcus did. Still wore her Bulls jersey to every chemo appointment. Still believed things would work out. Marcus believed it too most days. But today, staring at that bank account balance, belief felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. "Come on," Denise said, holding the door open. "Let's make some money." The dining room buzzed with conversation and the clinking of silverware on plates. Giordano's was known for its deep dish pizza and its upscale Italian entrees, the kind of place where families celebrated graduations and couples celebrated anniversaries. Marcus had served hundreds of tables here, thousands of customers. He knew how to smile even when his feet ached. He knew which wines paired with which dishes. He knew how to be invisible when diners wanted privacy and attentive when they needed something. He was good at his job. He needed to be. Marcus checked his section, tables 9 through 15. Table 9 was finishing dessert. Table 11 needed their check. Table 13 was. He stopped mid-step. Robert Chen, the restaurant manager, stood near the host stand talking to someone. Marcus couldn't see who at first, just a tall figure in an expensive-looking casual shirt. But then the man turned slightly and Marcus's breath caught. Michael Jordan. It couldn't be, but it was. That face was unmistakable. Marcus had watched it on television for years, had seen it on magazine covers, on billboards around the city. The face that had carried the Bulls to 6 championships. The face that represented everything Marcus loved about basketball, about never giving up, about pushing through when everything hurt. His heart hammered against his ribs. "Marcus." Chen waved him over. "I need you on table 14. Marcus walked over on autopilot, his mind racing. Table 14 was in his section. Table 14 was. "This is Marcus Williams," Chen said smoothly, his manager voice in full effect. "He'll be taking excellent care of you this evening." Jordan glanced at Marcus briefly, offering a polite nod. Up close, he looked exhausted. Not just tired from the championship parade earlier that day, Marcus had seen the coverage on every news channel, but exhausted in a deeper way. His eyes held something heavy. "Evening," Jordan said, his voice quiet. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Giordano's." Marcus was amazed, his voice came out steady. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Jordan was with one other man, someone Marcus didn't recognize, middle-aged, wearing a suit despite the heat, carrying a leather portfolio. The man spoke first. "Water for both of us, please, and we'll need a few minutes with the menu." "Of course, I'll be right back." Marcus walked toward the bar, his legs feeling strange, like they belonged to someone else. Michael Jordan, at his table, the man he'd watched win championships, the man whose posters had covered his childhood bedroom walls, the man whose determination had inspired Marcus through his parents' funeral, through Aaliyah's diagnosis, through every impossible moment. "Did you see who's at 14? Whispered Jamie, one of the other servers, as Marcus filled 2 water glasses. "I saw." "Dude, that's Michael Jordan." "I know. You're so lucky. He probably tips huge." Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He was thinking about Aaliyah, about how she'd screamed with joy during Game 6 of the finals just 2 days ago. How she'd cried when Jordan hit that final shot when the Bulls won their 6th championship. How she'd said, "See, Marcus, if he never gives up, we can't either." He carried the waters back to table 14, his hands steady now. This was just another table, just another customer. He couldn't afford to mess this up by being starstruck. "Here you are, gentlemen." Marcus set the glasses down carefully. "Have you had a chance to look at the menu, or would you like to hear tonight's specials?" Jordan stared at his menu without really seeing it. The other man, his companion, did all the talking. "What do you recommend?" Marcus went through his usual spiel, describing the osso buco, the chicken marsala, the seafood risotto. He kept his voice professional, friendly but not intrusive. He could see other diners starting to notice Jordan, could see the whispers spreading through the restaurant like ripples in water. Jordan ordered the salmon. Barely looked up when he said it. His companion ordered the ribeye medium rare. "Excellent choices. I'll get those started for you." As Marcus walked away, he noticed Jordan pull out his cell phone, check it, then put it back in his pocket. His jaw was tight. Something was wrong. Marcus could sense it the way he could always sense when Aaliyah was having a bad day, even when she tried to hide it. But that wasn't his business. His business was serving the meal, doing his job, earning his tip. He needed this night to go well. He needed every night to go well. The kitchen was chaos. It always was during the dinner rush. Marcus put in his order, then checked on his other tables. Table 9 wanted their check. Table 11 needed more bread. Table 13's entrees were ready. He moved through his section mechanically, efficiently, his mind half on his work and half on table 14. Every few minutes, he'd glance over. Jordan had made 3 phone calls, each time stepping away from the table and moving toward the restaurant's entrance. Each time he returned, his shoulders seemed more tense, his expression more distant. Marcus brought their salads. Jordan thanked him quietly but didn't make eye contact. He brought their entrees. The companion, Marcus heard him say his name was George, tried to make small talk about the championship parade. Jordan responded in monosyllables. Marcus wanted to ask if everything was okay, but you didn't do that. You didn't intrude on customers' private moments, especially not someone like Michael Jordan. So he stayed professional, stayed invisible, stayed out of the way. Other diners weren't so respectful. A man from table 7 approached during dessert, asking for an autograph. Jordan signed his napkin with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. A woman from table 4 came next with her young son. Jordan was kinder to the boy, asking his name, signing his Bulls cap. Marcus watched it all from a distance, impressed by Jordan's grace even as he could see how much effort it took. Whatever was bothering him, he was pushing through it. That was the Michael Jordan way, wasn't it? Push through. Never let them see you struggle. Marcus understood that more than he'd ever admit. It was nearly 10 o'clock when table 14 asked for their check. Marcus printed it out, slipped it into the black leather folder and brought it to the table. The total was $247.83. "Whenever you're ready, no rush," Marcus said, setting it down. George opened the folder, pulled out a credit card without looking at the amount, and handed it back to Marcus. "We're all set." "Thank you, sir. I'll be right back." Marcus ran the card, printed the receipt, and returned it with a pen. George signed quickly. They stood to leave. "Thank you for dining with us this evening," Marcus said. "Have a good night." Jordan looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time all evening. For just a second, Marcus saw something in his eyes, pain maybe, or exhaustion so deep it went beyond physical tiredness. "Thanks," Jordan said, and then they were gone. Marcus cleared the table, stacking plates and gathering napkins. His hands moved automatically, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about how he'd tell Aaliyah about this tomorrow, how excited she'd be, how she'd want to know every detail, what Jordan ordered, what he said, how he looked. Then Marcus opened the black folder. The credit card receipt sat inside. George had signed it. The tip line was blank. The total line read, $24,783. Marcus stared at it. He counted the cash left on the table, exactly $247.83. He counted it again. No tip, nothing. His stomach dropped. Around him, the restaurant continued its rhythm, conversations, laughter, the kitchen staff calling out orders. But Marcus stood frozen at table 14, holding the receipt, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Michael Jordan, the man who'd made hundreds of millions of dollars, who just won his 6th championship, who'd inspired Marcus through the darkest moments of his life, had left him nothing. "Hey, Marcus." Denise touched his shoulder. "You okay?" He couldn't speak. He just showed her the receipt. Her eyes widened. "Are you kidding me?" Marcus shook his head. The restaurant's tip-out system meant he owed 3% of his total sales to the busboys and bartenders. On a $247 check, that was over $7. He just paid $7 for the privilege of serving Michael Jordan. "That's..." Denise trailed off, her face flushing with anger. "That's not right." But it was real. It was happening. And as Marcus finished his shift 2 hours later, walking home through streets still warm from the day's heat, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Not about the money, though he desperately needed the money. About the why. Why would someone capable of such greatness on the court show such carelessness off it? Why would someone who inspired millions not see the people right in front of him? Marcus didn't have answers. But as he unlocked the door to his apartment and heard Aaliyah call out from her room, How was work? He knew one thing. He couldn't let this go. Not yet. Marcus hadn't meant to lie to Aaliyah. When she'd called out asking about work, he'd stood in the narrow hallway of their apartment, his hand still on the doorknob, and made a choice. "It was fine," he'd said through her closed bedroom door. "Good tips tonight. Get some rest." The lie tasted bitter, but the truth felt worse. Aaliyah didn't need another reason to worry. She spent enough energy fighting her own battles without carrying his disappointments too. Now, 3 days later, Marcus stood outside Giordano's for his next shift, and the lie still sat heavy in his chest. He'd replayed that night 100 times, maybe more. Each time, he searched for something he'd missed. Had he been rude somehow? Had the service been slow? Had he forgotten something crucial? But he knew the answer. The service had been perfect. He'd been professional, attentive without hovering, quick without rushing. He'd done everything right, so why? "You're early." Robert Chen appeared beside him, keys jangling as he unlocked the side entrance. "That's not like you." Marcus checked his watch. 6:45. His shift didn't start until 7. Couldn't sleep much. Chen gave him a look that said he understood more than Marcus had admitted. "Still thinking about Sunday night?" "Does it matter?" "It matters that you're here doing your job." Chen held the door open. "That's what matters." Inside, the restaurant smelled like fresh bread and roasting garlic. The kitchen staff was already prepping for the dinner rush, chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, pulling fresh mozzarella from containers of water. Marcus tied on his apron in the break room, checking that his order pad and pens were in his pocket. Denise arrived at 6:55, her usual 3 minutes before her shift. She looked tired, more tired than usual, dark circles under her eyes. Her uniform wrinkled like maybe she'd pulled it from the laundry basket instead of the closet. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "Trevor's inhaler ran out. Had to take him to the ER last night when he couldn't breathe right." She slumped into a chair. 4 hours waiting. They gave him a breathing treatment and a prescription I can't afford to fill until Friday when I get paid. Marcus thought about the $37 he should have made Sunday night. 15% of $247. In the tip pool system they used, Denise would have gotten a share of that. Maybe $8 or $9. Not much, but enough to have helped with that prescription. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not your fault." But her voice said something different. Not blame exactly, just exhaustion. The kind that came from living on the edge where every missing dollar became a crisis. The evening started normally. Marcus had tables 6 through 12 tonight, a different section than Sunday. He served a family celebrating their daughter's college acceptance. He served a couple on their anniversary. He served a group of businessmen who ordered too much wine and left a generous tip. By 8 o'clock, his pocket held $63 in cash. Not bad for a Wednesday. Then George walked through the door. Marcus recognized him immediately, the man who'd been with Jordan on Sunday. Same suit, same leather portfolio, same confident walk of someone used to handling important matters. Chen seated him at table 9. Table 9 was in Marcus's section. Their eyes met as Marcus approached. George's expression flickered with recognition, then smoothed into professional neutrality. "Good evening," Marcus said. "Welcome back." "Thank you." George settled into his chair, setting the portfolio beside him. "Water, please, and I think I'll try the lobster ravioli tonight." "Excellent choice. Would you like to start with a salad or soup?" "The house salad, Italian dressing." Marcus wrote it down, his handwriting steady despite the question screaming in his head. Why was George back? Was this coincidence? Did it mean something? "I'll get that started for you." In the kitchen, Marcus leaned against the stainless steel counter trying to organize his thoughts. This was an opportunity, not to confront. He couldn't do that, not while working, but to observe, to understand. He brought George's salad, his water, his bread basket. Each time he stayed professional, friendly but not familiar. George seemed preoccupied, checking his phone repeatedly, making notes in a small leather-bound notebook. When Marcus brought the entrees, George looked up. "This looks perfect. Thank you." "My pleasure. Is there anything else I can get for you?" George hesitated, then spoke. "You're the same server from Sunday, aren't you? The one who took care of Michael's table?" Marcus's pulse quickened. "Yes, sir." "You were very professional, respectful. Michael appreciated that." The words hung between them. Marcus wanted to ask if he appreciated it, why didn't he show it? But he couldn't, not here, not now. "Thank you, sir, that means a lot." George returned to his meal and Marcus returned to his other tables, but his mind raced. Michael appreciated it, past tense. Like George and Jordan had discussed it later, like maybe they'd noticed something was off. Or maybe Marcus was reading too much into two simple sentences. At 9:30, George asked for his check. The total was $47.60. He paid in cash 320s. When Marcus returned with the change, George waved it away. "Keep it." He stood, gathering his portfolio. Then he paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Sunday night, did something happen? Something we should know about?" Marcus's throat tightened. This was it. The moment to speak up or let it go. He thought about Denise's son wheezing in the ER. He thought about his bank account still dangerously low. He thought about Aaliyah asking him 3 times this week if he was okay because she could sense something was wrong. "No, sir," Marcus heard himself say. "Everything was fine." George studied him for a long moment. "If you're sure." "I'm sure." After George left, Marcus cleared the table and pocketed the tip, $12.40. Generous, more than generous. The kind of tip that made a difference. Why had George been generous when Jordan hadn't been? Marcus finished his shift at 11, his mind churning with questions he couldn't answer. He walked home through the humid night, past the closed shops and occasional late-night diners, thinking about those 2 encounters 3 days apart. At home, Aaliyah was awake despite the late hour, sitting on their threadbare couch with her laptop balanced on her knees. She wore her Bulls jersey, the one she wore so often Marcus had washed it 100 times, the red fading to pink in spots. "How was work?" she asked without looking up. "Fine, good tips." Another lie. The tips had been fine, but nothing about tonight felt good. "That's great." She finally glanced at him and her smile faltered. "You look exhausted." "Long shift." "Marcus," she closed her laptop. "What's wrong? And don't say nothing. You've been weird all week." He sat down beside her, the couch springs creaking under his weight. For a moment he considered telling her everything. About Sunday night, about the missing tip, about George's return and cryptic comments. But then he saw how pale she looked, how thin her wrists had gotten, how the jersey hung loose on her frame. She had her next chemo appointment tomorrow. She didn't need his problems. "Just worried about tuition," he said. It was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. "Payments due tomorrow." "Did you get enough?" "I will," he would. He'd sold his laptop to a classmate for $200. Combined with what he had in his account, it was just enough. Barely. "I'm sorry." Aaliyah's voice went small. "I know my treatment is expensive. I know it's hard." "Hey," Marcus took her hand. Don't ever apologize for being sick. We're handling it. We're going to be fine." She squeezed his fingers. "You sound like Michael Jordan." Marcus froze. "What?" "You know, never give up, keep fighting, all that champion mentality stuff." She smiled. "You've got that same energy." The words hit Marcus like a punch. He thought about Jordan sitting at table 14, barely touching his food, making phone calls with tension in every line of his body. He thought about champions and what they cost. He thought about the gap between who people appeared to be and who they actually were. "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "Champion mentality." That night after Aaliyah went to bed, Marcus sat at their small kitchen table with his laptop, except he didn't have his laptop anymore. He'd sold it. So he pulled out his old journalism notebooks instead, the ones from his reporting classes. Professor Martinez always said good journalism started with observation, with questions, with refusing to accept the surface of things. Marcus started writing. Sunday, June 14, 1998. Michael Jordan dined at Giordano's. Table 14. With George, last name unknown, possibly assistant or manager. Arrived approximately 7:30 p.m. Left approximately 10:00 p.m. Jordan seemed distracted, tense. Made 3 phone calls during dinner, each time stepping away from the table. Barely ate his meal. Signed autographs for other diners but seemed to go through the motions. Check total, $24,783 tip, $0. Wednesday, June 17, 1998. George returned alone. Table 9, professional, courteous. Asked if something happened Sunday night. Left generous tip of $1,240 on $4,760 check. Questions: 1. Why did Jordan seem so distracted Sunday? 2. Why no tip? 3. Why did George come back? 4. What did George mean by something we should know about? 5. Did Jordan send George to check on me? Marcus stared at his notes. They raised more questions than they answered, but that was okay. Questions were a start. He thought about what Professor Martinez taught them. Context matters. Background matters. People don't exist in isolation. They exist in circumstances. What circumstances had Michael Jordan been dealing with on June 14th? Marcus pulled out the phone book. Aaliyah had taken his laptop, but she was asleep, and he didn't want to wake her, and looked up the number for the Chicago Public Library. They'd be open tomorrow. They'd have newspaper archives. He needed to know what else happened that day. What else might have been on Jordan's mind? Not to excuse what happened. Denise still couldn't afford Trevor's inhaler, and Marcus still had to sell his laptop, but to understand it. Because the Michael Jordan he thought he knew wouldn't do this without a reason. Or maybe the Michael Jordan he thought he knew didn't exist at all. Marcus closed his notebook and turned off the kitchen light. Tomorrow, after he took Aaliyah to her appointment, after he paid his tuition, after he figured out how to make rent, he'd go to the library. He'd find his answers, or at least he'd try. Marcus's alarm went off at 6 a.m., dragging him from a restless sleep filled with fragmented dreams, tables that needed clearing, checks that never added up right, and Michael Jordan's face, exhausted and distant, repeating over and over, "Thank you for your service." He lay in bed for 30 seconds, staring at the water-stained ceiling of his bedroom before forcing himself up. Aaliyah's chemo appointment was at 9. He needed to be awake, present, strong for her. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of their ancient refrigerator and the distant rumble of traffic outside. Marcus showered quickly in their cramped bathroom, the water pressure weak as always, and dressed in jeans and a clean t-shirt. He made coffee in the percolator his mother had used every morning, one of the few things he'd kept after the accident. Aaliyah emerged from her room at 7:30, already dressed, her thin frame swimming in sweatpants and a hoodie despite the June heat. She'd learned that chemo made her cold, always cold. "Morning," she said, her voice raspy. "Morning, you want eggs?" "Just toast. My stomach feels weird already." Marcus made her toast with butter and strawberry jam, the way she liked it. He watched her eat slowly, mechanically, like it was a chore. This was how it went before treatments, her body already anticipating the poison it was about to receive, even poison meant to save her life. They took the bus to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, sitting near the back where Aaliyah could lean against the window. Marcus held her backpack, stuffed with books she probably wouldn't read, her phone, headphones, and a blanket. The city rolled past outside, people heading to work, street vendors setting up, the lake glittering in the morning sun. "You brought your tuition check?" Aaliyah asked quietly. Marcus patted his pocket. "Got it." "Good." She closed her eyes. "I don't want you falling behind because of me." "That's not happening. You're not making me fall behind. The world just costs too much." She smiled without opening her eyes. Yeah, it really does. The cancer center waiting room was already full when they arrived. Other patients, other families, all wearing the same expression of determined endurance. Marcus checked Aaliyah in at the desk and they found 2 seats near the window. A nurse called Aaliyah's name 20 minutes later. Marcus stood to follow, but she waved him off. "I'm okay. Go pay your tuition. I'll text you when I'm done." "You sure?" "Marcus," she gave him a look. "I've done this 17 times. I can handle it." He watched her walk through the double doors, her small frame disappearing into the treatment area, and felt the familiar helplessness settle over him like a wet blanket. He couldn't fight her cancer. He couldn't take the treatments for her. All he could do was make sure she had a home to return to, food to eat, and a brother who didn't fall apart. Northwestern's financial aid office was in a different building, a 10-minute walk across campus. Marcus joined the line of students waiting to talk to advisors, most of them younger than him, fresh-faced and worried about different things. Textbook costs, parking passes, meal plans. When his turn came, he approached the window and handed over his check for $2,400. The woman behind the glass, her nameplate read Sandra Martinez, no relation to his professor he'd asked once, processed it efficiently. "This covers fall semester tuition," she said. "But you're still carrying a balance from spring, $1,500. It's past due." Marcus's stomach dropped. "I thought I paid that." "You made a partial payment in March. The remaining balance is accruing late fees." She turned her monitor so he could see. There it was, $150,000 in red letters, plus $7,500 in late fees. "I can't." Marcus stopped, recalculating everything in his head. His bank account was nearly empty now. His next paycheck wasn't until next Friday. "Can I set up a payment plan?" Sandra's expression softened. "Let me check what we can do." She typed for a moment, then frowned. "I can defer the late fees if you make a payment of at least $500 by the end of the month. But the balance needs to be cleared by August 1st, or you'll be dropped from your fall classes." End of the month. That was 13 days away. $500 in 13 days on top of rent, on top of Aaliyah's medications, on top of everything else. "Okay," Marcus said, because what else could he say? "I'll make it work." "I know it's hard." Sandra handed him a receipt. "But you're almost done, right? Last semester." Last semester, if he could afford to finish it. Marcus left the financial aid office feeling like he'd been punched. He walked across campus in a daze, past students sitting on the lawn studying, past the library where he'd spent countless late nights writing papers, past the journalism building where he'd learned to chase truth. He thought about Sunday night, about $37 that should have been in his pocket. $37 wouldn't solve his problems, but it would have been a start. It would have been something. His phone buzzed. "Aaliyah, treatment going okay, probably another hour. Love you." Marcus texted back, "Love you too, I'll be there soon." But first he had a stop to make. The Chicago Public Library's main branch was a 20-minute walk from campus. Marcus had spent hundreds of hours here during his undergraduate years, back when he'd first fallen in love with journalism. The building was beautiful, huge windows, high ceilings, rows and rows of books and periodicals. He went straight to the reference desk, where a librarian named Patricia, he recognized her from previous visits, greeted him with a warm smile. "Marcus, haven't seen you in a while. What can I help you with today?" "I need to look at newspaper archives, specifically June 14th and 15th of this year. Recent stuff, that'll be on microfiche, come with me." She led him to a back room filled with microfiche machines and filing cabinets. "What are you researching?" "Just following up on something." Marcus didn't want to explain. Not yet, maybe not ever. Patricia pulled the microfiche for mid-June and showed him how to load it into the machine. You know how to use this. I do, thank you, Patricia. Holler if you need anything. Marcus sat down at the machine and began scrolling through the Chicago Tribune from June 15th. He scanned headlines, looking for anything about Michael Jordan, anything that might explain that night. Page 3. Bulls celebrate 6th championship with downtown parade. Page 7. Jordan. This team made history. Page 12. Economic impact of Bulls' victory expected to boost city revenue. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained the tension Marcus had witnessed. Then on page 15, a small article tucked in the corner. James Jordan murder case. Defense files new appeal. Marcus leaned closer to the screen, his heart beginning to pound. Attorneys for Daniel Green, one of 2 men convicted in the 1993 murder of James Jordan, filed an appeal Wednesday in Robeson County, North Carolina, seeking to overturn his conviction. Green maintains his innocence and claims new evidence could exonerate him. A hearing is scheduled for June 14, 1998 in Lumberton, NC. June 14th, the day Jordan was at Giordano's. Marcus scrolled back through the previous day's papers, looking for more information. He found another article from June 13th. Jordan family to attend appeal hearing for father's convicted killer. The article was brief, but it included a quote from someone close to the family. This is an extremely difficult time. The Jordan family requests privacy as they deal with this painful process. Marcus sat back in his chair, the pieces beginning to fall into place. James Jordan had been murdered 5 years ago. Marcus remembered it, everyone remembered it. The shocking news that Michael Jordan's father had been killed during a robbery. 2 men had been convicted. Justice, people said, had been served. But now, one of those men was claiming innocence, filing an appeal. And Jordan had been at a hearing about it on the same day Marcus served him dinner. Marcus thought about Jordan's behavior that night. The phone calls, the tension, the barely touched meal, the distant eyes. He thought about a man sitting in a courtroom, listening to lawyers argue that maybe his father's killer should go free. Then trying to have a normal dinner, trying to celebrate a championship while his private world crumbled. "Oh," Marcus whispered to the empty room. He printed the articles, 2 copies, 20 cents each, and carefully folded them into his pocket. Then he scrolled through more recent days, looking for follow-up coverage. June 16th, judge denies appeal in James Jordan murder case. The article was short. A North Carolina judge denied an appeal filed by Daniel Green, convicted in the 1993 murder of James Jordan. The judge ruled that no new evidence warranted overturning the conviction. The Jordan family declined to comment. Marcus read it 3 times. Jordan had gone to that hearing on June 14th, had sat through testimony, had faced his father's convicted killer. Then that same evening he'd gone to Giordano's and failed to leave a tip, because his mind was somewhere else, because he was drowning in grief and trauma and the impossible task of being Michael Jordan, champion, icon, superhero, when he was really just a son who missed his father. Marcus printed this article too. He sat at the microfiche machine for a long time after, staring at the screen without seeing it. He thought about his own parents, killed by a drunk driver 2 years ago. He thought about the anger he'd carried for months at the driver, at God, at the universe for being so randomly cruel. He thought about how some days, even now, he forgot to do basic things. Forgot to eat, forgot to call people back, forgot to be the person he was supposed to be. He'd never forgotten to tip a server, but he'd forgotten other things. Hurt other people without meaning to. Been absent when he should have been present. Was this the same thing? Was pain an excuse, or just an explanation? His phone buzzed. Aaliyah, done, feeling okay. Where are you? Marcus checked his watch. 11:30. He'd been at the library for over an hour. On my way. Be there in 15 minutes. He gathered his printed articles, thanked Patricia, and left the library. The sun was high now, the heat building toward afternoon intensity. Marcus walked quickly, his mind racing faster than his feet. He understood more now. But understanding didn't solve anything. Denise still needed money for her son's inhaler. Marcus still owed $500 by the end of the month. Aaliyah still had cancer. Jordan's pain didn't erase any of that, but it complicated the story. It added context. It made Marcus question his own anger. At the hospital, Aaliyah was waiting in the lobby looking pale but steady. A nurse had given her crackers and ginger ale, and she clutched both like lifelines. How'd it go? Marcus asked, taking her backpack. Same as always. Poison in, poison doing its thing, poison hopefully killing the right cells. She sipped her ginger ale. How was the tuition office? Marcus considered lying again, but he was tired of lying. Complicated. I owe more than I thought, but we'll figure it out. We always do. Aaliyah looped her arm through his as they walked toward the exit. We're like the bulls, never give up, right? Right, Marcus said quietly. They took the bus home, Aaliyah dozing against his shoulder. Marcus stared out the window, watching the city pass, thinking about Jordan and James, Jordan and grief and money and all the ways life refused to be simple. That evening, after Aaliyah was settled on the couch with a movie, Marcus pulled out his notebook again. He added the new information, the appeal hearing, the timeline, the context. Then he wrote, understanding doesn't fix anything. But maybe it's still important to understand. His shift at Giordano's started at 5 tomorrow. He'd work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday too, 4 shifts. If he averaged $80 in tips per shift, that was $320. Not enough for the $500 he needed, but closer. He'd pick up extra shifts if Robert would give them to him. He'd work doubles. He'd do whatever it took. But first, he needed to decide something. Was he going to let this go? Except that sometimes people, even heroes, failed. That life was complicated and messy and there were no clear villains. Or was he going to keep digging, keep trying to understand not just what happened, but why it mattered? Marcus looked at his notebook, at the printed articles, at all his questions without answers. He thought about Professor Martinez saying, good journalism isn't about gotcha moments. It's about truth. Even when truth is complicated, especially when truth is complicated. He picked up his pen and wrote one more line. I need to talk to someone who knows Jordan, who can help me understand if this pattern, good person, bad moment, is real or if I'm just making excuses for someone who doesn't deserve them. Tomorrow, after his shift, he'd call Professor Martinez. She'd worked as a sports journalist in the 80s and 90s. She'd covered the Bulls. She might have insights or at least guidance on how to pursue this without it becoming ugly. Marcus closed his notebook and turned off the kitchen light. Through the living room doorway, he could see Aaliyah curled up on the couch, the TV's glow washing over her pale face. She looked small, fragile, but also determined, still fighting. If she could fight her battle, he could fight his. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with the truth, whatever that turned out to be. Even if the truth was complicated, especially if the truth was complicated. The morning sunlight cut through Marcus's bedroom window at an angle that promised another scorching day. He'd been awake since 5, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, thinking about phone calls he needed to make and questions he needed to ask. Sleep had come in fits, an hour here, 30 minutes there, interrupted by dreams of courtrooms and empty tip lines, and his sister's pale face under fluorescent hospital lights. At 6:30, he gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee. Strong black, the way his father used to drink it. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his notebook open, reviewing everything he'd written over the past few days. The facts were clear enough. The interpretation, that was the complicated part. Aaliyah shuffled out of her room at 7, wrapped in her blanket like a cocoon. The chemo always hit hardest the day after treatment. Her skin had a grayish tint and her eyes were ringed with dark circles. "You're up early," she mumbled, collapsing onto the couch. Couldn't sleep. Marcus brought her a glass of water and the anti-nausea pills the doctor had prescribed. "How are you feeling?" Like I got hit by a truck made of acid and misery. She took the pills, swallowing with effort. But I'm alive, so that's something. That's everything. Marcus sat beside her, pulling the blanket up around her shoulders. You need anything? Crackers, ginger ale. Not yet, maybe in an hour. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly through her nose. You working today? 5 to close, but I'll be here until then. I can make you soup later. You're a good brother, Marcus. The words settled over him like a weight. He didn't feel like a good brother. A good brother would have enough money saved that one missing tip wouldn't matter. A good brother wouldn't be scrambling to figure out how to pay rent and tuition and medication bills all at once. I try, he said quietly. Aaliyah drifted back to sleep, and Marcus returned to his notebook. He had Professor Martinez's office number written on the inside cover from the beginning of the semester. She held office hours on Thursdays from 10 to noon. It was Thursday. He could call. But what would he say? Hi, Professor. I'm investigating why Michael Jordan didn't tip me because I need to know if my hero is a good person having a bad moment or just another rich guy who doesn't care about working people. That sounded bitter, petty, not like journalism, like a grudge. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to think like a reporter instead of a server. What was the real story here? It wasn't about the tip, not really. It was about the distance between public persona and private reality. It was about how we treat the people we encounter in everyday moments when the cameras aren't watching. It was about grief and trauma and whether those things excused our failures or just explained them. That was a story worth pursuing, not for revenge, for understanding. At 9:50, Marcus dialed Professor Martinez's office. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. Helen Martinez. Professor Martinez, it's Marcus Williams, from your investigative journalism seminar. Marcus, of course. How are you? How's your sister? The warmth in her voice made something in Marcus's chest unclench slightly. Professor Martinez had always been kind to him, understanding when he needed extensions because of Aaliyah's appointments, encouraging about his writing even when he turned in rough drafts. She's hanging in there. Treatment was yesterday, so today's rough, but she's tough. I'm glad to hear it. What can I do for you? Are you working on a story? Marcus took a breath. Maybe. I'm not sure yet. That's why I'm calling. I need advice on whether something is worth pursuing and if so, how to do it ethically. I'm listening. Marcus told her the story. Not everything. He kept Aaliyah's medical bills and his tuition problems vague, didn't mention exactly how much that missing tip had cost him. But he told her about serving Jordan, about the missing tip, about discovering the appeal hearing, about George's return to the restaurant. Professor Martinez was quiet for a long moment after he finished. That's quite a situation, she said finally. What's your instinct telling you? That there's more to the story. That Jordan was dealing with something terrible that night, and maybe that explains what happened. But also that explanation isn't the same as excuse, and there are real people affected by what happened. Good, you're thinking like a journalist. He could hear her shifting in her chair, the squeak of old leather. So here's my question for you. What's your goal? What are you hoping to accomplish? Marcus hadn't expected that question, but the answer came immediately. I want to understand. I want to know if this is a pattern, if Jordan regularly treats service workers poorly, or if this was an aberration, a bad moment in a bad situation. And if it's a pattern, what then? Then people should know, not to destroy him, but because the truth matters. Because we build up these icons and forget they're human, and that's not fair to anyone, not to them, not to us. And if it's an aberration? Marcus thought about Denise's son wheezing in the ER, about his own empty bank account. Then I want to know why it happened, what was going through his head, whether he even realizes it happened. Okay, so you want the full story, whatever that story turns out to be. Professor Martinez paused. Have you thought about just asking him? Asking Michael Jordan, how would I even? You write him a letter. You explain who you are, what happened, what you're trying to understand. You give him a chance to respond. That's ethical journalism, Marcus. You don't ambush people. You give them the opportunity to tell their side. A letter to Michael Jordan. The idea seemed simultaneously obvious and impossible. What if he doesn't respond? Then you pursue other avenues. You talk to other people who have interacted with him in service contexts. You look for patterns. You build the story from multiple sources, but you start by giving him a chance to respond directly. Marcus grabbed his pen and started writing. Okay, what else? You keep your emotions out of it. I can hear in your voice that this hurt you personally, and that's understandable. But the story can't be about your hurt feelings. It has to be about something larger, about how we treat people when no one's watching, about the impact of trauma on behavior, about the responsibilities that come with being a public figure. You see the difference? I do. And Marcus, be prepared for this to go nowhere. He's Michael Jordan. He probably gets thousands of letters. He may never see yours. He almost certainly won't respond. Are you okay with that? Marcus thought about it. Was he okay with trying and failing, with putting in the work and getting no answers? Yes, because at least he'd have tried. At least he'd have done something other than just accept it and move on. I'm okay with that, he said. Good. Then write the letter, make it honest but professional, give him your contact information and a reasonable timeline for response, say 2 weeks. Then while you're waiting, do the background work, find other sources, build the context. That way, whether he responds or not, you're prepared. They talked for another 10 minutes about research strategies and ethical considerations. Professor Martinez gave him the names of 3 other sports journalists who might have insights into Jordan's character. She reminded him to keep detailed notes on everything, dates, times, sources, conversations. This could turn into something significant, she said before they hung up. Or it could turn into nothing. Either way, you're doing the work right. That's what matters. After the call, Marcus sat with his notebook and started drafting the letter. He wrote 5 versions, each one either too angry or too apologetic. The 6th version felt right. Dear Mr. Jordan, my name is Marcus Williams. I'm a journalism student at Northwestern University and a server at Giordano's restaurant in downtown Chicago. On the evening of June 14, 1998, I had the privilege of serving your table. I'm writing because something happened that night that I'm trying to understand. When you left, there was no tip included with your payment. I don't write this looking for money or an apology, but rather seeking understanding. As a journalist, I've learned that every story has context. Since that evening, I've discovered that June 14 was the day of an appeal hearing related to your father's case. I cannot imagine how difficult that must have been, and I want to be clear that I'm not looking to criticize or attack you. However, I'm also aware that your actions that night had real consequences for real people, myself and my coworkers who depend on tips to survive, to pay for things like medical bills and rent and education. My coworker Denise, a single mother of 3, couldn't afford her son's asthma medication that week partly because of the missing tip share. I'm writing to ask if you'd be willing to talk about what happened that night, not for a published story necessarily, but so I can understand the full picture. I believe that understanding context matters, but I also believe that actions have consequences, even when those actions come from a place of pain. If you're willing to speak with me, I can be reached at the number below. I would welcome a conversation, either by phone or in person, at your convenience. Respectfully, Marcus Williams. He included his phone number and the address of Giordano's. Then he read it over 7 more times, making small adjustments. The tone needed to be perfect, honest without being accusatory, firm without being confrontational. It was nearly noon when he finished. Aaliyah was awake again, sitting up on the couch and nibbling crackers. "What you working on?" she asked. Marcus hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. "A journalism project, following up on something that happened at work." "For a class?" "Sort of, more like independent research." Aaliyah studied him with the sharp perception that came from spending so much time together. "Does it have to do with why you've been weird all week?" "Maybe. Is everything okay?" Marcus crossed the living room and sat beside her. "Everything's fine. I'm trying to figure something out, about people and how they act and whether circumstances excuse behavior or just explain it." "That's deep." Aaliyah leaned her head against his shoulder. "What's the answer?" "I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, the city hummed with midday traffic and distant sirens and the ordinary chaos of life continuing. "You know what I think?" Aaliyah said finally. "I think people are complicated, like everyone's fighting battles you can't see. But that doesn't mean their battles make it okay to hurt other people. Both things can be true." Marcus thought about that. Both things can be true. Jordan could have been devastated by the appeal hearing and still have an obligation to treat service workers with basic courtesy. Understanding his pain didn't erase the impact of his actions. "When you get so wise?" Marcus asked. "Cancer gives you a lot of time to think." She smiled, but it was tired. "Plus, I watch a lot of opera." At 3 o'clock, Marcus walked to the post office and mailed the letter. He paid extra for certified mail with a return receipt, journalist habits, making sure he could prove it was delivered. Then he walked to Giordano's, arriving 45 minutes early for his shift. Robert Chen was in his office doing paperwork when Marcus knocked. "You're early again." "Wanted to ask about picking up extra shifts. I need the hours." Chen leaned back in his chair. "Everything okay?" "Just some unexpected expenses. Thought I'd work more if you've got the shifts available." "I can probably give you Saturday lunch. It's not a great section. Lots of families, lots of separate checks, but the volume's high." "I'll take it." "You sure? That'll be 6 days this week." Marcus thought about the $500 due by the end of the month, about Aaliyah's next round of medication, about all the ways money slipped through your fingers no matter how carefully you held on. "I'm sure." The evening shift was busy, a Thursday night crowd celebrating the start of the weekend. Marcus served his tables efficiently, forcing himself to be present and engaged despite his wandering mind. He smiled at jokes, made recommendations, kept drinks filled, cleared plates promptly. By the end of the night, he'd made $93 in tips, his best Thursday ever. Denise caught him as they were cashing out. "Hey, I wanted to say thanks." "For what?" "For helping with Trevor's medication. The money you gave me last week, it made the difference." Marcus hadn't given her money, but then he remembered, when Jordan's companion George had left that generous tip, Marcus had split it differently than usual, giving Denise a larger share than the tip pool system required. "It's nothing," Marcus said. "It's not nothing. It's the difference between my kid breathing and not breathing." Denise's eyes were fierce. "So thank you." Walking home at 11:30, Marcus thought about impact and intention. He'd helped Denise not because he was trying to be a hero, but because he could. Because a small gesture on his part made a big difference in her life. Maybe that was what bothered him most about the Jordan situation. Not that Jordan had been thoughtless, but that such a small gesture would have meant so much. $37. Pocket change to someone worth hundreds of millions. Everything to someone like Denise. At home, Marcus checked on Aaliyah, asleep in her bed, breathing steadily, then sat at the kitchen table with his notebook. He added today's work to his timeline. The letter was mailed. Now he had to wait. And while he waited, he had research to do. He pulled out the list of names Professor Martinez had given him. 3 sports journalists who'd covered Jordan extensively. He'd start calling them tomorrow, asking careful questions, building context. The truth was out there. He just had to find it, however complicated it turned out to be. The weekend passed in a blur of double shifts and exhaustion. Saturday lunch was exactly as Robert had warned, endless families with separate checks, kids spilling drinks, parents asking for modifications to every dish. Marcus smiled through it all, his feet aching, his back tight, his mind only half present. By Sunday night, he'd worked 28 hours in 3 days and made $417 in tips. Still not enough for the $500 due on Friday, but closer. Monday morning, Marcus woke with a plan. Aaliyah had a follow-up appointment at 11, which gave him 2 hours to make phone calls. He'd start with the journalists Professor Martinez had recommended. The first name on his list was Thomas Brennan, who'd covered the Bulls for the Sun-Times throughout the 90s. Marcus found his office number through the newspaper's main line and called at 9 o'clock sharp. "Brennan," a gruff voice answered. "Mr. Brennan, my name is Marcus Williams. I'm a journalism student at Northwestern, and Professor Helen Martinez suggested I contact you. I'm working on a piece about Michael Jordan, and I was hoping you might have a few minutes to talk." A piece about Jordan? Kid, there have been about 10,000 pieces about Jordan. What makes yours different? Marcus had prepared for this question. I'm looking at the gap between public persona and private behavior. Specifically, how public figures treat people when the cameras aren't watching. Brennan was quiet for a moment. That's actually interesting. Most kids want to write another puff piece about championships and greatness. You got time to meet in person. I don't like doing this stuff over the phone. They agreed to meet at a diner near the Sun-Times building at 1 o'clock. Marcus hung up feeling a surge of something like hope. This was real reporting, real journalism, not just stewing in his own hurt feelings but actually pursuing a story. He made breakfast for Aaliyah, scrambled eggs and toast, which she picked at slowly, and they took the bus to the hospital. Her appointment was routine: blood work, vitals, a consultation with Dr. Patel about how she was tolerating the treatment. "Your counts look good," Dr. Patel said, reviewing the lab results on her computer screen. "White blood cells are recovering well. How's your energy level?" "Terrible for 2 days after chemo, then better," Aaliyah said. "Same as always." "That's normal. You're responding well overall. We'll continue with the current protocol." Dr. Patel turned to Marcus. "Any concerns from your end?" Marcus thought about money and stress and sleepless nights, but those weren't medical concerns. Just making sure she takes her medications on schedule. "Good, keep doing that." Dr. Patel smiled at Aaliyah. "You're a fighter. I'm impressed with your progress." After the appointment, Marcus took Aaliyah home and made sure she was settled before heading back out. The diner where he was meeting Brennan was a classic Chicago establishment, worn vinyl booths, a long counter with rotating stools, and a laminated menu featuring breakfast served all day. Thomas Brennan was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and a newspaper. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades chasing stories. He waved Marcus over. "You Williams?" "Yes, sir. Thank you for meeting with me." "Don't call me sir, makes me feel ancient." Brennan gestured at the seat across from him. "Sit. You want coffee?" "Sure." Brennan flagged down a waitress, ordered Marcus coffee and a piece of pie for himself, then leaned back and studied Marcus with sharp eyes. "So, Helen Martinez vouched for you, which means something. But before I tell you anything, I need to know what you're really after here. Are you trying to dig up dirt on Jordan? Because if so, you can save us both time and leave now." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I'm not trying to dig up dirt. I'm trying to understand a specific incident and put it in context. Whether that makes Jordan look good or bad isn't the point. The point is truth." "What incident?" Marcus told him. The dinner at Giordano's, the missing tip, the appeal hearing he discovered later. He kept his tone neutral, journalistic, even though talking about it still made his stomach tight. Brennan listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, the older journalist was quiet for a long moment, stirring sugar into his coffee. "That was a bad day for him," Brennan said finally. "One of the worst. I was at that courthouse in North Carolina, saw him leave. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one afternoon." "So it's true. The appeal hearing really affected him that much." "Kid, his father was murdered, violently. And 5 years later, he had to sit in a courtroom and listen to lawyers argue that maybe the guys who did it should go free. How do you think it affected him?" Brennan's voice was sharp but not unkind. "Yeah, it affected him." Marcus pulled out his notebook. "Can I quote you?" "You can, but let me finish first." Brennan took a sip of coffee. "Here's what you need to understand about Jordan. He's not a saint. Nobody is. But he's also not the villain you might be building him up to be in your head. I've covered him for 15 years. I've seen him do incredibly generous things, pay for strangers' hospital bills, fund scholarships, tip hotel staff hundreds of dollars. I've also seen him be thoughtless, demanding, occasionally cruel. So which one is the real Jordan?" "Both. That's what you're missing. People aren't one thing or the other. They're complicated." Brennan pointed his fork at Marcus. "You said you're trying to understand the gap between public persona and private behavior, but maybe there is no gap. Maybe the public Jordan and the private Jordan are both real, and they both exist at the same time." The waitress brought pie apple with ice cream melting on top. Brennan took a bite before continuing. "Here's a story. 3 years ago, Jordan was in New York for a game, stayed at the Plaza. There was a housekeeper there, older woman, immigrant, worked there for 20 years. She mentioned to someone on his security team that her daughter was sick, couldn't afford the medical bills. Next day, Jordan left an envelope in his room when he checked out. $5,000 and a note that said, 'For your daughter, get well soon.'" Marcus wrote quickly. "Did the housekeeper talk about it publicly?" "Not until after he'd left, and even then only to hotel staff. She was grateful, not looking for publicity." Brennan paused. "But here's another story. Same year. Jordan was at a restaurant in Chicago, not Giordano's, different place. Server spilled wine on his jacket, expensive jacket. Jordan lit into the kid, made him cry in front of everyone. Didn't tip, left bad review with the manager." Marcus looked up from his notes. "Both stories, same year." "Same person. That's my point." Brennan leaned forward. "Jordan can be incredibly generous and incredibly petty, sometimes in the same day. He can be thoughtful and thoughtless. He can see people or look right through them, just like anyone else, except his impact is magnified because of who he is." "So how do I write about that? How do I tell a story that holds both truths?" "That's the hard part. Most journalists don't bother. They write either the hero piece or the hit piece. But if you want to do real work, you have to hold both truths at once. You have to say, this person did this generous thing and this hurtful thing, and both are true, and that's what being human looks like." They talked for another hour. Brennan gave Marcus more examples. Times Jordan had been remarkably kind, times he'd been casually cruel. Times his generosity had changed lives, times his thoughtlessness had caused real harm. A pattern emerged. Jordan at his best was extraordinary, capable of profound empathy and generosity. Jordan at his worst was dismissive, so focused on his own concerns that other people became invisible. The key variable, Brennan said, is whether he's present. When Jordan is mentally and emotionally present, he's one of the most thoughtful people you'll meet. When he's distracted, dealing with his own stuff, he can walk past you like you don't exist. And the night I served him, June 14th, he wasn't present, couldn't have been, not after that hearing. Brennan finished his pie and pushed the plate away. Look, I'm not excusing what happened to you. If you depend on tips and he didn't leave one, that's real harm, regardless of his reasons. But if you're asking whether he's a bad person or a good person, the answer is neither. He's a person. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, usually somewhere in between. Marcus thought about Aaliyah's words from a few days ago. Everyone's fighting battles you can't see. But that doesn't mean their battles make it okay to hurt other people. Both things can be true. Can I ask you something else? Marcus said. Have you ever confronted him about the times he's treated people badly? Brennan's expression shifted, something like regret crossing his face. Once, about the server he made cry, I asked him about it in an interview. He got defensive, said the kid had ruined a $2,000 jacket. I pushed back, said it was an accident, and his reaction was disproportionate. You know what he said? What? He said, "You're right. I was having a bad day and I took it out on him. That wasn't fair." Just like that. Acknowledged it, took responsibility. Then he asked me to find out the server's name so he could apologize. Did he? I don't know. I gave his people the information, but I never followed up. Brennan looked uncomfortable. Maybe I should have. Maybe that's on me. I got the quote I needed and moved on. Marcus understood that feeling. The pull between telling the story and being part of it, between observing and intervening. They exchanged contact information, and Brennan made Marcus promise to send him the final piece, whatever it turned out to be. Walking back to the bus stop, Marcus felt his understanding shifting. This wasn't a story about a villain who'd wronged him. It was a story about complexity, about the ways we're all capable of both kindness and cruelty, often in the same breath. That evening, after another shift at Giordano's, $84 in tips, bringing his week's total to $501, Marcus sat at his kitchen table and called the second journalist on Professor Martinez's list. Patricia Gomez had covered the Bulls for ESPN and now worked as a freelance sports writer. When Marcus explained his project, she laughed, not unkindly but with recognition. Let me guess. You served him, he didn't tip, and now you're trying to figure out if he's a jerk or if there were circumstances. Something like that. Join the club. Half the service workers in Chicago have a Jordan story. Some of them are great. He picked up the tab for their whole restaurant, left $1,000 tips, paid for someone's wedding. Some of them are terrible. He didn't acknowledge them, was rude, stiffed them on tips. The man contains multitudes. Patricia told Marcus about a piece she'd worked on years ago about how celebrities treated restaurant staff. I interviewed 30 servers who'd worked with Jordan. 23 of them had glowing things to say. 7 had experiences like yours. The 7 bad experiences, every single one coincided with documented difficult periods in Jordan's life. His father's death, custody disputes, contract negotiations, bad losses. So he's only generous when things are going well. No, that's not what I'm saying. Patricia's voice was patient. I'm saying that when he's dealing with trauma or stress, he sometimes fails to be present for other people. But here's the thing, who doesn't? The difference is that Jordan's failures have bigger impact because he has more resources. When he fails to tip, it's not $20, it's what $20 represents. The distance between who we think he is and who he actually is. Marcus understood. The missing tip had hurt not just because of the money, though the money mattered, but because it shattered the image he'd built of Jordan as someone who saw people, who cared, who lived up to his own philosophy of giving everything. "So what do I do with that?" Marcus asked. "How do I write about someone who's both the hero and the disappointment?" "You tell the truth, all of it, the good and the bad. You don't make excuses, but you don't ignore context either. You let readers sit with the discomfort of not having a simple answer." After hanging up, Marcus added Patricia's insights to his growing file. The picture that was emerging was clear. Michael Jordan was capable of extraordinary generosity and careless cruelty, often within the same day. His capacity for empathy was matched by his capacity for self-absorption. He could see people deeply or not see them at all. He was, in other words, human. But did being human excuse the impact of his actions? Marcus thought about Denise's son, Trevor, struggling to breathe because his mother couldn't afford medication. He thought about his own tuition bill and the laptop he'd sold. He thought about all the ways that Jordan's momentary absence, his failure to be present on one difficult evening, had rippled outward, affecting real people with real consequences. Understanding why Jordan did it didn't make those consequences disappear. Wednesday afternoon, Marcus took Aaliyah to another chemo appointment. Sitting in the waiting room, he watched her doze against his shoulder and thought about priorities, about what mattered, about fighting battles while trying not to become so consumed by your own fight that you stopped seeing other people's. His phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. Marcus answered quietly. "Is this Marcus Williams?" "Yes." "This is George Kohler. I'm Michael Jordan's personal assistant. I believe we met briefly at Giordano's." Marcus's heart started pounding. "I remember. Michael received your letter. He'd like to meet with you if you're willing. Are you available Friday afternoon?" Friday, 2 days away. Marcus's mind raced. What would he say? What would he ask? Was he ready for this? "Yes," he heard himself say, "I'm available." George gave him an address, a private office building in downtown Chicago, and a time, 3 o'clock. "Please don't share this information with anyone. Michael values his privacy." "I understand." After hanging up, Marcus sat very still. Aaliyah stirred beside him. "Who was that?" she mumbled. "Nobody, just work stuff." But it wasn't nobody. It was the biggest interview of Marcus's life, and he had 2 days to prepare. 2 days to figure out what questions would get at the truth. 2 days to decide whether he wanted answers or just wanted to be right. 2 days to learn whether Michael Jordan, the icon, the champion, the complicated human being, would give him the understanding he was looking for, or whether some questions didn't have satisfying answers, no matter how hard you searched. Marcus didn't sleep Wednesday night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through possible questions and conversations in his mind. What would he say to Michael Jordan? How did you look someone in the eye and ask them why they'd hurt you, even unintentionally, without sounding petty or vindictive? By Thursday morning, he'd filled 6 pages in his notebook with potential questions, crossed most of them out, and started over 3 times. Nothing felt right. Everything sounded either too confrontational or too soft. At 7 a.m., he gave up on sleep and made coffee. Aaliyah found him at the kitchen table 2 hours later, surrounded by crumpled paper and empty cups. "You look terrible," she said, pouring herself orange juice. "Thanks." "Seriously, Marcus, what's going on? You've been weird for almost 2 weeks now." She sat down across from him, her expression serious despite her pale complexion and the dark circles under her eyes. "And don't tell me it's nothing. I'm sick, not stupid." Marcus looked at his sister, 19 years old, fighting for her life, still somehow finding the energy to worry about him. She deserved the truth, or at least more of it than he'd been giving her. "Something happened at work," he said slowly, "a couple weeks ago, and I've been trying to figure out how to deal with it." "What happened?" "I served Michael Jordan." Aaliyah's eyes widened. What, Marcus, that's amazing. Why didn't you tell me? Because it didn't go the way I thought it would. Marcus took a breath. He didn't leave a tip, and I've been trying to understand why. The excitement drained from Aaliyah's face. Oh. Yeah. I don't know what that is. Disappointing, confusing. She picked at the label on her juice bottle. Did you do something wrong? No, I've gone over it 1,000 times. The service was good. I was professional. It wasn't about me. At least, I don't think it was about me. Then why? Marcus explained what he'd discovered, the appeal hearing, the timing, the context of Jordan's father's case. He told her about the other stories he'd heard from Thomas Brennan and Patricia Gomez, about complexity and context and how people could be both generous and thoughtless. Aaliyah listened quietly, absorbing it all. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. So you're saying he was having the worst day of his life and he forgot to tip you, she said finally. Basically. And that hurt you, because you needed that money and because he's your hero, and heroes aren't supposed to let you down. Marcus nodded, surprised by how clearly she'd cut through to the heart of it. But you also understand why it happened, Aaliyah continued. You get that he was dealing with something terrible, so now you don't know what to feel. Exactly. Aaliyah leaned back in her chair, thinking. Outside, the morning sun was breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across their small kitchen. You know what I think, she said. I think you need to tell him all of this, not in an angry way, just honest. Tell him what happened and how it affected you, but also tell him you understand about his dad. Let him respond. Give him a chance to explain or apologize or whatever he needs to do. I already wrote him a letter. He wants to meet tomorrow. He what? Aaliyah sat up straight. Marcus, that's huge. Why didn't you lead with that? Because I'm terrified. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I come across as some bitter server looking for a handout? What if? What if you just tell the truth? Aaliyah interrupted. You're a journalist, right? You're supposed to pursue truth, so be truthful. Tell him exactly what you told me, that it hurt, that you understand the context, that you're trying to figure out how both things can be true at once. Marcus looked at his sister, marveling at her clarity. When did you get so wise? I told you, cancer gives you time to think. She smiled, but it was sad around the edges. Plus, I've been thinking a lot lately about people and how they act when they're in pain. Because I see you, Marcus. I see how much you're struggling, even though you try to hide it. I see you working doubles and selling your stuff and staying up all night worried about money. And I see you still showing up for me, still being kind, still trying to do the right thing, even when you're drowning. Marcus felt his throat tighten. That's different. Is it? You've made mistakes these past 2 years. I know you have, even if you don't talk about them. You've probably been short with people, forgotten things, let stuff slip. Because you're dealing with losing mom and dad and my cancer and money problems and trying to finish school. You're in survival mode, just like Jordan was that night. But I've never what? Never hurt someone without meaning to. Never been so consumed by your own problems that you miss someone else's needs. Aaliyah's voice was gentle but firm. Marcus, last month you forgot it was my birthday until Denise mentioned it at work. You came home with a grocery store cake at 11 p.m. and I pretended I'd forgotten too so you wouldn't feel bad. Was that cruel? No. You were dealing with a million things. Your mind was somewhere else. Marcus stared at her, stunned. You knew I forgot. Of course I knew, but I also knew you didn't mean to, and I knew you were doing your best. She reached across the table and took his hand. That's what I'm saying. People in pain sometimes hurt other people, not on purpose, just because pain makes us blind to everything except survival. Jordan was probably blind that night. Blind to you, blind to normal courtesy, blind to everything except getting through the day. Does that make it okay? No, it makes it understandable. There's a difference. Aaliyah squeezed his hand. You can be hurt by something and still understand why it happened. You can hold someone accountable and still have compassion. Both things can be true. There it was again. Both things can be true. The phrase that had been circling in Marcus's mind for days, given voice by his 19-year-old sister who somehow understood human nature better than most people twice her age. So what do I say to him tomorrow? Marcus asked. The truth, all of it. Not to make him feel guilty, but to help him see what he couldn't see that night. To give him a chance to acknowledge it and maybe do better. Aaliyah paused. And maybe to help yourself see that he's human. That heroes are just people who sometimes do heroic things and sometimes do thoughtless things, and that's okay. We can love them anyway. They sat together in the morning light, Marcus's hand in Aaliyah's, the kitchen warm with summer sun and shared understanding. I don't deserve you, Marcus said quietly. Yeah, you do. And I don't deserve you either, but we've got each other anyway, so we make it work. Aaliyah smiled. Now go write whatever you need to write to prepare for tomorrow. And Marcus, try to sleep tonight. You look like death. You're one to talk. Hey, I have an excuse. I'm literally poisoning myself twice a month to stay alive. What's yours? Despite everything, Marcus laughed. The rest of Thursday passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus called Professor Martinez to tell her about the meeting, and she spent an hour on the phone coaching him through interview techniques, how to ask open questions, how to listen more than talk, how to create space for authentic response rather than defensive posturing. Remember, she said, this isn't about winning an argument, it's about understanding. If you go in trying to make him admit he was wrong, you'll get nowhere. But if you go in genuinely seeking to understand what happened, you might get something real. Marcus wrote out his key questions. 1. Do you remember the evening of June 14th at Giordano's? 2. Were you aware that no tip was left? 3. Can you tell me what was on your mind that night? 4. Have there been other times when personal stress has affected how you treat service workers? 5. What do you think about the impact of that night on the people who served you? Simple questions, open-ended, not accusatory, giving room for honest response. He rehearsed them in front of the bathroom mirror, then felt ridiculous and stopped. That evening, he worked a short shift at Giordano's, 5 to 9, just 4 hours. He needed the money, but he also needed to be rested for tomorrow. Robert noticed his distraction and pulled him aside during a quiet moment. You okay, Williams? You've been off your game lately. I'm okay, just dealing with some stuff. Aaliyah stuff. No, she's hanging in there. This is different. Marcus hesitated, then decided Robert deserved to know. Remember Michael Jordan coming in a couple weeks ago? Of course, hard to forget. He didn't leave a tip. I've been trying to understand why. Tomorrow I'm meeting with him to talk about it. Robert's eyebrows shot up. You're meeting with Michael Jordan to discuss a tip. Sort of. It's more complicated than that. It's about, Marcus struggled to articulate it. It's about how we treat people, about responsibility, about what happens when our pain makes us blind to other people's pain. Robert studied him for a long moment. That's heavy stuff for a missed tip. Maybe, or maybe it matters more than we think. Maybe how we treat people when no one's watching, that's who we really are. And who do you think Jordan really is? Marcus thought about all the stories he'd heard, the generosity and the cruelty, the presence and the absence, the hero and the human. I think he's complicated, Marcus said finally. Like everyone, I just want to understand the complications. Robert clapped him on the shoulder. Good luck tomorrow, and Marcus, whatever happens, you've got guts. Not many people would pursue this. Most would just be bitter and move on. Maybe I'm just stubborn. Maybe, but it's a good kind of stubborn. Marcus finished his shift, $62 in tips, and walked home through the warm evening. The city was alive with people enjoying summer weather. Couples on dates, families eating ice cream, teenagers playing basketball under streetlights. At home, Aaliyah was watching a Bulls game replay, Game 6 of the finals, the one from 2 weeks ago. Jordan hitting the final shot, the championship celebration, the peak of glory. "You've watched this like 15 times, Marcus said, dropping onto the couch beside her. "I know, but I love this part." She pointed at the screen where Jordan was cutting down the nets, surrounded by teammates. "Look at his face. He's crying. You can see how much it means." Marcus watched. Jordan's face was indeed wet with tears, his expression a mixture of joy and relief and something deeper, maybe gratitude, maybe exhaustion, maybe the culmination of everything he'd fought for. "He's human," Marcus said quietly. "Yeah, that's what makes it beautiful." Aaliyah paused the video. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" "No, but I don't think I ever will be, so I might as well just do it." "That's the spirit," she smiled. "You're going to be great. Just remember, you're not going there to attack him or defend yourself. You're going there to have a conversation. Two humans talking about a moment when one of them was invisible to the other. When you become so good at this, I have a lot of time to think while poison drips into my veins." Aaliyah's smile turned mischievous. "Plus, I've been reading your journalism textbooks when you're at work. Don't look so surprised. You think I just watch TV all day." That night Marcus did sleep. Not well, but better than the night before. He dreamed of his parents, of conversations he wished he'd had before they died, of questions he'd never get to ask, of understanding that came too late to matter. He woke Friday morning with a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened today, he'd done the work. He'd pursued truth with integrity. He'd given Jordan a chance to respond. That was all he could do. Aaliyah was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. "What are you doing up so early?" Marcus asked. "Research." She turned the screen toward him. "I wanted to read more about Jordan's dad, about what happened, so I'd understand what you're walking into." Marcus looked at the screen. Articles about James Jordan's murder, the robbery, the trial, the conviction, and more recently, the appeal that had been denied. "It's brutal," Aaliyah said softly. "What he went through, what the family went through. I can't imagine sitting in a courtroom hearing people argue that your father's killers might go free." "Neither can I. So when you talk to him today, remember that. Remember that he's carrying that, not as an excuse but as context." Aaliyah closed the laptop. "And Marcus, thank him. Thank him for agreeing to meet, for giving you this chance, for being willing to have a hard conversation when he could have just ignored your letter. That takes courage too." Marcus hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. Jordan didn't have to respond. He could have thrown the letter away or had his assistant send a form response or simply ignored it. Instead, he'd agreed to meet face to face. That meant something. At 2 o'clock, Marcus put on his best shirt, a button-down his mother had bought him 2 Christmases ago, and his only pair of dress pants. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a young man trying to look professional, trying to be taken seriously, trying to navigate a situation way beyond his experience. "You look good," Aaliyah said from her doorway. "Very serious journalist." "I feel like I'm going to throw up." "That's normal, just breathe. And remember everything we talked about." Marcus hugged her, careful not to squeeze too hard. She felt so fragile in his arms, all bones and determination. "Love you," he said. "Love you too. Now go get your story." The address George had given him was in a sleek office building downtown, all glass and steel and the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Marcus gave his name to security and they directed him to the 12th floor. George Kohler was waiting when the elevator doors opened. He looked the same as before, professional, composed, wearing a suit despite the summer heat. "Marcus, thank you for coming." He shook Marcus's hand firmly. "Michael is ready for you. Follow me." They walked down a carpeted hallway to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there, standing by the window with his back to the door, was Michael Jordan. He turned as they entered, and for the second time in 2 weeks, Marcus found himself face to face with the man who defined excellence for a generation. "Mr. Williams," Jordan said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming, and thank you for your letter. Can we talk?" Marcus's hand disappeared into Jordan's grip, firm but not crushing, the handshake of someone who'd done this 10,000 times but still meant it. Up close, Jordan looked older than he did on television. There were lines around his eyes, gray threading through his hair at the temples, and something in his expression that Marcus hadn't seen during the championship celebrations. Weariness. "Yes, sir. Thank you for agreeing to meet." Jordan gestured toward the conference table. "Please sit. Can George get you anything? Water, coffee?" "Water's fine." Marcus's throat felt like sandpaper. George poured 3 glasses from a pitcher on the sideboard, then quietly excused himself. "I'll be outside if you need anything." The door clicked shut, leaving Marcus alone with Michael Jordan in a room that suddenly felt too large and too small at the same time. They sat across from each other at the polished table, the city sprawling below them through the windows. Jordan took a sip of water, then set the glass down carefully. "I read your letter 7 times. The first time I was defensive. The second time I was angry. By the 7th time I was just ashamed." Marcus hadn't expected this opening. He'd prepared for denial, for explanation, maybe for a polite brush-off, not immediate admission. "Ashamed." Marcus pulled out his notebook, his hand steadier now that the conversation had begun. "That I hurt people without knowing it, that I was so buried in my own pain I couldn't see past it." Jordan's voice was quiet but clear. "Can I tell you about that day? June 14th. Please." Jordan leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant, seeing something Marcus couldn't. "I flew to North Carolina that morning. Early flight, 6 a.m. out of O'Hare. My mom came with me. She didn't want to go, didn't want to face it again, but she came anyway because that's what we do. We're a family. We show up." Marcus wrote quickly, capturing the details. The hearing started at 10. It was in this small courtroom in Lumberton, the same place where we'd sat through the original trial 5 years ago. Same wooden benches. Same smell of old paper and floor polish. Same windows looking out at the same trees. Like we'd gone back in time, except we hadn't. We were still in the nightmare. Jordan's jaw tightened. The lawyer Green's lawyer, he stood up and argued that the evidence was flawed, that maybe his client didn't do it, that maybe justice had been wrong. And I sat there listening to him talk about my father like he was just a case file. Just another appeal to process, not a person, not someone who taught me to play basketball in our driveway, not someone who drove 8 hours to watch me play in college, just evidence. Marcus watched Jordan's hands. They were clenched on the table, knuckles pale. "The worst part," Jordan's voice cracked slightly. "The worst part was they had to show photos, crime scene photos. The lawyer was arguing about blood spatter patterns or something, and they put my father's autopsy photos up on a screen, in front of everyone, in front of my mother." "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. "My mom started crying. Not loud, she's never been loud about her pain, but I could see her shoulders shaking. And I'm sitting there thinking I should comfort her, I should hold her hand, I should do something. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, watching these strangers debate whether my father's killers should go free while his body was displayed on a screen like evidence in a science class." Jordan took another sip of water, his hand trembling slightly. The hearing lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the judge said he'd rule within a week. We walked out of that courthouse at 1:30 in the afternoon, and I remember thinking, I have to get back to Chicago. I have a team dinner tonight. I have appearances scheduled. I have to be Michael Jordan. You flew back the same day. Same day. We landed at O'Hare around 6. George picked me up. He'd been handling all my scheduled appearances, trying to keep everything running while I dealt with this. He told me I had 3 options. I could cancel everything and go home. I could do the team dinner and cancel the rest, or I could push through and do it all. Which did you choose? All of it, because that's what I do. I push through. Jordan's smile was bitter. That's the championship mentality everyone loves. Never quit, never show weakness, never let them see you break. So I went to the team dinner, smiled, shook hands, signed autographs, gave a speech about our historic season. Then George and I went to your restaurant because I hadn't eaten all day and he was worried I'd collapse if I didn't get food. Marcus felt his understanding shifting, pieces falling into place. What do you remember about that evening at Giordano's? Honestly, not much. Jordan met his eyes directly. I remember sitting down. I remember you being professional, respectful. You didn't hover, didn't ask for autographs or photos. You just served. And I appreciated that in the moment when I could appreciate anything. Do you remember leaving? I remember George handling the bill. I remember thinking I needed to get home. I remember walking out and getting in the car and finally being alone where I could stop pretending to be okay. Jordan paused. I don't remember anything about a tip. George told me later, after he got your letter, that he'd paid with his credit card because I wasn't functioning well enough to handle basic transactions. He didn't think about the tip line because he was focused on getting me out of there before I fell apart in public. So you didn't deliberately choose not to tip? No, but that doesn't make it okay. Jordan's voice was firm. George showed me the receipt a few days ago, showed me that the tip line was blank, showed me what that meant for you and your coworkers. And I realized that my pain that night had consequences for people I never even saw, real consequences. Marcus thought about Denise, about Trevor's inhaler, about his own tuition payment. It did have consequences. Tell me about them. I want to know, not to make excuses, but because I need to understand the full impact of what happened. So Marcus told him about Denise and her 3 kids, about Trevor's asthma and the medication she couldn't afford, about the tip pool system and how Marcus had actually paid $7 for the privilege of serving Jordan's table, about selling his laptop to make tuition, about his sister's cancer and the mounting medical bills, about living on the edge where every missing dollar became a crisis. Jordan listened without interrupting, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. I had no idea, he said when Marcus finished. Not about your specific situation, I couldn't have known that, but about the system, about how tips work, about what it means when someone in my position doesn't tip. I should have known. I should have been aware. You were dealing with something terrible. I was, and that's an explanation, but you're right. It's not an excuse. Jordan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Can I tell you something I've never said publicly? Of course. That appeal hearing. The judge denied it, like you probably found out. But there was something the news didn't report because of legal restrictions. The lawyers presented what they called new evidence, suggesting there might have been a third person involved in my father's murder. Someone who was never caught, never charged, never brought to justice. Marcus stopped writing, looking up sharply. The judge ruled the evidence wasn't credible enough to overturn the convictions, but that doesn't mean it was wrong. It just means it wasn't strong enough legally. So I've been living these past 2 weeks wondering, is someone still out there? Someone who helped kill my father? someone who's been free for 5 years while I thought justice was done. Jordan turned back to face Marcus and his eyes were wet. I tell you this not to make you feel sorry for me. I tell you because I want you to understand where my head was that night. I was drowning. And when you're drowning, you stop seeing the people around you. You stop seeing anything except trying to breathe. I understand that, Marcus said carefully. My parents died 2 years ago. Car accident, drunk driver. And there were weeks after where I barely functioned, where I probably hurt people without meaning to because I was just trying to survive each day. I'm sorry about your parents. I'm sorry about your father. They sat with that for a moment, two people connected by grief and the ways it blinds us. So where does that leave us? Jordan asked. You came here for answers, for understanding. Have I given you that? Marcus considered the question carefully. Yes and no, I understand what happened now. I understand why. But understanding doesn't solve the practical problems. Denise still needed that money. I still had to sell my laptop. Your pain doesn't erase those consequences. You're right, so let me address that. Jordan pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and set it on the table between them. This is for you, for Denise, and for anyone else affected by that night. It's not payment for your silence. I know your letter said you weren't asking for money, but I'm giving it anyway because your letter showed me something I wasn't seeing. The ripples of that night, the impact beyond my own pain. Marcus stared at the envelope. I don't want. I know you don't want it. That's why it matters that I'm giving it, because you showed me accountability while offering grace. You held me responsible while recognizing my humanity. That's rare, that's valuable, and it deserves recognition. I'm a journalist, or trying to be one. If I take money from you, it compromises. This isn't payment for a story. This is addressing a wrong. There's a difference. Jordan pushed the envelope closer. Take it. Help your sister. Help Denise. And if it makes you uncomfortable, think of it as me paying a debt I should have paid 2 weeks ago with interest for the inconvenience. Marcus picked up the envelope but didn't open it. It felt heavy with more than just money, with responsibility, with complication, with the weight of what came next. Can I ask you something else? Marcus said. Anything. My research found other incidents like this one. Times when you didn't tip or were thoughtless with service workers. Times that coincided with difficult periods in your life. Is this a pattern? Do you only see people when things are going well? Jordan winced but didn't look away. That's a fair question, and honestly, I don't know. I'd like to think I'm always aware, always present, but the truth is I'm not. None of us are all the time. The difference with me is that my failures are more visible and have more impact. Because you have more resources. Exactly. When I fail to tip, it's not just $20 or $30. It's what that represents, someone with hundreds of millions of dollars being careless with someone who depends on tips to survive. The gap makes it worse. So what do you do about that? How do you fix a pattern like that? Jordan returned to his seat. Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. George and I have been talking about it since your letter arrived. We're implementing a system. He'll handle all my transactions, but he'll also make sure tips are included and generous. It's not perfect, but it's a start. That puts the responsibility on George instead of you. You're right again. Jordan looked frustrated with himself. I need to be more present, more aware, more intentional about seeing people, especially when I'm struggling. That's the real work, isn't it? Not just avoiding mistakes, but being genuinely present for the people around me. Marcus thought about Aaliyah, about how she'd said being in pain didn't excuse hurting others. My sister said something this week. She said everyone's fighting battles you can't see, but that doesn't make it okay to hurt other people. Both things can be true. Your sister sounds wise. She is. Cancer will do that. Gives you time to think about what matters. How old is she? 19. She's been fighting leukemia for 18 months. She's tough, tougher than me. Jordan was quiet for a moment. What's her name? Aaliyah. Would you tell Aaliyah something for me? Tell her that Michael Jordan says she's a champion. Not because of basketball or because she's winning some competition, but because she's fighting every day and still finding wisdom to share. That's real strength. Marcus felt his throat tighten. She'll love that. She's a huge fan, watches your games all the time. Then tell her one more thing. Tell her that champions aren't people who never fall down. They're people who get back up. And from what you've told me, she's getting back up every single day. They talked for another hour. Jordan asked about Marcus's journalism career, about his studies, about his goals. Marcus asked about the foundation work Jordan was doing, about life after basketball, about how he handled the pressure of being an icon. The hardest part, Jordan said, is that people see Michael Jordan and they forget there's a person underneath. Someone who makes mistakes. Someone who has bad days. Someone who sometimes fails to live up to his own standards. Your letter reminded me that the person matters as much as the icon, maybe more. Does it help? Marcus asked, being seen as a person instead of just an icon. It's terrifying and relieving at the same time. Terrifying because people might be disappointed when they see I'm flawed. Relieving because it means I can stop pretending to be perfect. Jordan smiled, genuine this time, not the media smile. You've given me a gift with this conversation, Marcus, even though it started with me failing you. Maybe we gave each other gifts, Marcus said. You showed me that understanding is complicated, that people can be both thoughtful and thoughtless, generous and careless, human and heroic, all at the same time. As the meeting wound down, George returned to walk Marcus out. At the door, Jordan shook his hand again. One more thing, Jordan said. Your letter mentioned you're a journalism student. Would you be willing to write about this? The real story, not to make me look good, but to show the complexity. Marcus hesitated. I don't know, it feels personal now. That's exactly why it might be important, because it is personal, because it shows how our private pain affects others, how our failures have consequences, how understanding and accountability can coexist. Those are stories worth telling. I'd need full access, full honesty, no PR filter. You'd have it. George can set up whatever you need. They exchanged contact information, and Marcus left the building in a daze. The envelope sat heavy in his jacket pocket. He didn't open it until he was on the bus home, and when he did, he found $15,000 in cashier's checks and a note in Jordan's handwriting. For Aaliyah's treatment, your tuition, Denise's family, and anyone else affected by my absence that night. This doesn't erase what happened, but maybe it helps address the consequences. Thank you for seeing me as human while holding me accountable. That's the hardest balance to strike, and you did it with grace. M. Marcus stared at the checks, his vision blurring. This was more than making up for a missing tip. This was acknowledging impact. This was taking responsibility. This was Michael Jordan being present when it mattered most. At home, Aaliyah was waiting on the couch, trying to look casual but clearly anxious. So, she asked the moment he walked through the door, how did it go? Marcus sat beside her and told her everything. The conversation, the explanations, the apology, the envelope, and finally Jordan's message for her. He said, I'm a champion. Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. Michael Jordan said that about me. He did, and he meant it. She was crying now, happy tears mixing with exhausted relief. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Marcus held his sister while she cried, and he thought about champions and heroes and humans. about how they were all the same people, just at different moments, about how understanding someone's pain didn't erase their impact, but it changed how you carried that impact, about how sometimes the most important stories weren't about villains or heroes. They were about people trying to do better after they'd failed. And maybe that was heroic too. Marcus didn't go to work that Friday night. He called Robert and asked for the evening off, the first time he'd ever requested time off with less than a day's notice. Robert, sensing something significant had happened, agreed without question. Instead, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his notebook and the $15,000 in checks, trying to process what the afternoon had meant. Aaliyah had gone to lie down, exhausted from the emotional weight of hearing Jordan's message, and the apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren. $15,000. It was more money than Marcus had seen in one place since his parents' life insurance payout, most of which had already gone to Aaliyah's treatment and paying off their parents' remaining debts. This money could change everything: pay his tuition in full, cover 6 months of Aaliyah's medications, give them breathing room for the first time in 2 years. But it also complicated everything. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Professor Martinez. She answered on the third ring. "Marcus, how did the meeting go?" "It was complicated. Can I come to your office Monday? I need advice." "Of course, but are you okay? You sound shaken." "I'm okay. I think I need to figure out what to do next." They agreed to meet at 10 a.m. Monday, and Marcus spent the rest of the evening reading through all his notes from the past 2 weeks. The timeline, the interviews with Brennan and Gomez, the newspaper articles about the appeal hearing, his observations from that night at Giordano's, and now the transcript he'd written of today's conversation with Jordan. A story was emerging. Not the story he'd thought he was chasing when this started, not a takedown of a thoughtless celebrity or a vindication of a wronged server. Something more nuanced, something about human complexity and the ways trauma ripples outward, and how accountability and compassion weren't opposites but necessary partners. But could he write it? Should he write it? Saturday morning, Marcus took the checks to his bank. The teller's eyes widened when she saw the amounts, and she called her manager over to verify them. 20 minutes later, the money was deposited. $5,000 for his tuition, $3,000 for Aaliyah's medical expenses, $7,000 divided between himself, Denise, and 2 other servers who'd been working that night. From the bank, Marcus went directly to Denise's apartment in Logan Square. She lived on the 3rd floor of a walk-up, in a 2-bedroom she shared with her 3 kids. Marcus had been here once before, dropping off a textbook she'd borrowed. Denise answered the door in sweatpants and a faded Cubs t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Behind her, Marcus could hear cartoons playing on TV and children's voices arguing about something. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "Can I come in? I need to talk to you about something." She let him in, looking puzzled. The apartment was small but clean, filled with the organized chaos of a single mother managing 3 kids. Toys were stacked neatly in bins. Homework assignments covered the refrigerator. A basketball hoop hung on the back of a bedroom door. "Kids, go play in your room for a few minutes," Denise called out. 3 children, ages 7, 9, and 11, trooped past Marcus with curious glances. They sat at her small kitchen table, and Marcus pulled out an envelope with Denise's name on it. "Remember Michael Jordan, the table from 2 weeks ago?" Denise's expression darkened. "How could I forget? That missing tip cost me." "I know, and he knows now too. He asked me to give you this." Marcus handed her the envelope. "What is this?" "Open it." Denise opened the envelope carefully and pulled out a cashier's check for $3,000. Her hand started shaking. "This is, Marcus, this is." $3,000. He wanted to make things right, to address what happened that night and its impact. But why? How? Denise stared at the check like it might disappear. Marcus explained the letter he'd written, the meeting yesterday, Jordan's acknowledgement of what had happened and his desire to address the consequences. He left out some of the more personal details about Jordan's father, keeping those confidential, but gave her the essential truth. Jordan had been drowning in grief that night, had failed to be present, and now wanted to take responsibility for that failure. Denise cried. Not delicate tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from carrying too much weight for too long. Marcus sat with her, not speaking, just present. "I can pay my rent," she finally said, her voice thick. "All of it, not just scrape by, but actually pay it. And Trevor's medication. And maybe," she laughed through her tears, "maybe I can take my kids to a movie, something normal, something that isn't just surviving." "You deserve that." Does he know, Jordan? Does he know what this means? I told him. About Trevor's inhaler, about your situation. He listened, really listened. Denise wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I was so angry at him, so angry, and now I don't know what to feel. You can be angry at what happened and grateful for this. Both things can be true. Your sister said that to you, didn't she? About both things being true. Marcus smiled. She's smarter than both of us. Before leaving, Marcus gave similar envelopes to two other servers, Jamie and Carlos, who'd been working that night and lost tip pool shares. Their reactions were the same. Shock, tears, gratitude mixed with confusion about how to feel about someone who'd hurt them, and then tried to make amends. Sunday, Marcus worked a double shift, partly because he needed the money even with Jordan's check, partly because he needed the normalcy of routine work to process everything. Between lunch and dinner service, he sat in the break room and started writing. Not the full story yet, just fragments, observations, questions. What makes someone a good person? Is it their intentions or their impact, their best moments or their worst, the harm they cause or the amends they make? Jordan was in pain that night. Real, legitimate, devastating pain. Does that excuse his blindness to others? Does it explain it? Yes. And maybe explanation isn't about excusing, it's about understanding so we can all do better. Denise is angry and grateful. I'm hurt and appreciative. We contain multitudes, all of us. We're not one thing or another. We're everything at once. Robert found him in the break room at 4 o'clock. You're writing again, that's good. You stopped for a while there. Did I? After your parents died, you stopped carrying that notebook everywhere. Stopped scribbling observations between orders. I was worried you'd lost it, that spark that makes you a writer. Marcus hadn't realized Robert had noticed. It's been hard to see stories when you're just trying to survive. And now I'm in the middle of the most complicated story I've ever encountered, and I don't know how to tell it. Start with the truth. That's what you journalists always say, right? Monday morning, Marcus sat across from Professor Martinez in her cluttered office. Books lined every wall, stacks of newspapers covered every surface, and the coffee mug on her desk said, "Comfort the afflicted, afflict the comfortable." He told her everything, the meeting, the checks, Jordan's offer to give him full access to write the story. When he finished, Professor Martinez was quiet for a long moment. So you're wondering if you can still write this story ethically, now that you've accepted money from your subject. Exactly. Doesn't that compromise my objectivity? Does it? You didn't solicit the money. You didn't accept it as payment for favorable coverage. He gave it to address a wrong he committed, not to influence your reporting. She leaned back in her chair. The question isn't whether you can write the story. It's whether you should, and if so, how. I think I should. I think it matters. This story about complexity and accountability and how we treat people when we're in pain. I agree, so how do you write it? Marcus had been thinking about this all weekend. Full disclosure, I tell readers exactly what happened, that I was the server, that I wrote to Jordan, that he gave money to address the impact of that night. I make my involvement completely transparent. Good, what else? Multiple perspectives. Not just Jordan's side and my side, but other people who have interacted with him. Context about his father's case. The broader questions about how we judge public figures. Better, what's your angle? What's the story really about? Marcus thought carefully. It's about the distance between who we think people are and who they actually are. About how trauma affects behavior. About whether understanding someone's pain means we have to excuse their impact. About, he paused, finding the right words. About how we can hold people accountable while still recognizing their humanity. Professor Martinez smiled. Now you've got it. That's a story worth telling. Not a puff piece, not a hit piece, but something real and complicated and true. But who would even publish it? It's too personal for a newspaper piece, too long for a magazine article. Start with a long-form piece for the Tribune. They do investigative features, or pitch it to a national magazine, The Atlantic, Harper's, The New Yorker. This is the kind of nuanced reporting they value. She paused. Or you could turn it into your senior thesis, a long-form journalism project that explores these themes in depth. Marcus hadn't considered that. His senior thesis was due in December, 6 months away. He'd been planning to write something safe, something that wouldn't require this much emotional labor. But this story mattered. It mattered more than safe. I want to do it right, Marcus said, which means more research, more interviews, building the full context. Then do it, take the summer. Interview everyone you can. Research Jordan's history with service workers. Look at the psychology of trauma and grief. Understand the economics of tipping and service work. Build something comprehensive. They spent another hour mapping out a research plan. Marcus would interview Jordan again, multiple times, with George present to help verify details. He tracked down other service workers who'd interacted with Jordan, both positive and negative experiences. He'd interview psychologists about trauma's impact on behavior. He'd researched the James Jordan case thoroughly to understand the context of that appeal hearing. It would be months of work. It would be difficult and emotionally draining and probably wouldn't pay anything until it was published. But it would be true, and truth mattered. That evening, Marcus sat down with Aaliyah to explain what he was planning. So you're writing about Jordan, about what happened. She was curled up on the couch under her blanket, looking small but alert. I'm writing about complexity, about how people can be both good and thoughtless, about accountability and grace. And you're going to put yourself in the story. I have to. I can't pretend to be an objective observer when I'm a participant. The only ethical way to write it is to be completely honest about my role. Aaliyah considered this. People are going to say things, that you took money from Jordan, that you're biased, that you're either too soft on him or too hard on him, depending on which side they're on. I know. Are you ready for that? Marcus thought about the past 2 weeks, the anger and confusion, the research and reflection, the conversation with Jordan that had changed his understanding of everything. I don't know if anyone's ever ready for criticism, but I think the story is important enough to be worth it. Then write it. Write it the way only you can, because you were there, because you were hurt, because you did the work to understand anyway. That's what makes it valuable. Over the next 6 weeks, Marcus threw himself into the project. He interviewed Jordan 3 more times, each conversation revealing new layers. They talked about the pressure of being an icon, about grief and its long tail, about the gap between intention and impact. Jordan was remarkably candid, acknowledging failures Marcus hadn't even known about. There was a hotel maid in Phoenix, 1992, Jordan said during their second interview. I was having a terrible day, lost a game I should have won, fought with my wife on the phone. This woman came to clean my room, and I snapped at her for coming too early, made her cry. I didn't think about it again until after my father died, and suddenly I kept remembering all these moments where I'd been cruel to people who were just doing their jobs. Did you ever apologize to her? I tried, had my assistant track her down. She'd moved on, different job, different city. We sent money, but that's not the same as a real apology. Jordan's voice was heavy with regret. You don't get those moments back. You can try to make amends, but you can't undo the harm. Marcus interviewed Denise, Jamie, and Carlos about their experiences that night and their reactions to Jordan's amends. He interviewed Thomas Brennan again, and Patricia Gomez, and 4 other journalists who'd covered Jordan over the years. He found a hotel housekeeper Jordan had tipped $1,000 in 1996. He found a restaurant server Jordan had insulted in 1994. The pattern was clear. When Jordan was present, mentally, emotionally, spiritually present, he was remarkably generous and thoughtful. When he was absent, buried in his own pain or pressure, he could be thoughtless to the point of cruelty. The difference wasn't character, it was presence. Marcus interviewed Dr. Sarah Chen, a psychologist who specialized in trauma. She explained how pain narrows our field of vision, how survival mode makes us blind to everything except immediate threats, how grief can turn us inward so completely that other people become invisible. It's not an excuse, Dr. Chen said, but it is a mechanism. When we're drowning, we stop seeing the people around us. That's biology, not choice. The choice comes in what we do after, whether we acknowledge the harm, make amends, learn to do better. By late August, Marcus had over 200 pages of notes and transcripts. He'd interviewed 37 people. He'd read everything ever written about Jordan's relationship with service workers. He'd researched the economics of tipping, the psychology of grief, the sociology of celebrity. Now he had to write it. He started with the scene at Giordano's, the night everything changed. He wrote about serving Jordan, about the missing tip, about his initial anger and confusion. Then he zoomed out, adding context. The appeal hearing, his own parents' death, Aaliyah's cancer, the economics of survival on the edge. He wrote about his investigation, the newspaper articles, the interviews, the slowly building understanding that Jordan wasn't a villain but a human being in pain. He wrote about the letter he'd sent and the meeting that followed. About Jordan's explanation and apology, about the checks meant to address consequences, about the complicated feelings of being hurt and understood simultaneously. He wrote about Denise and Trevor, about other service workers who'd experienced both Jordan's generosity and his thoughtlessness, about the pattern of presence and absence. He wrote about Dr. Chen's explanation of trauma, about how pain makes us blind. And finally, he wrote about what it all meant, about holding people accountable while recognizing their humanity, about how understanding doesn't erase harm but changes how we carry it, about the difference between excuse and explanation. The piece came in at 12,000 words, far too long for most publications, but Professor Martinez thought The Atlantic might be interested. Marcus spent 2 weeks revising, cutting, sharpening. He sent it to Jordan for fact-checking, which felt strange but necessary. Jordan called after reading it. "It's honest," he said, "almost painfully honest, about both of us." "Is that okay?" "It's better than okay, it's true, and truth is what you promised." Jordan paused. "There's one thing I want to add, though, for the end." "What's that?" "After your letter, after our conversation, I started paying more attention, to being present, to seeing people. And I've realized something, it's work, constant work. Being present doesn't happen automatically. You have to choose it every day, especially when you're in pain. I'm still not perfect at it, but I'm trying. And that's because of what you showed me." Marcus added Jordan's words to the final section, a note of hope and growth to balance the complexity. In September, The Atlantic accepted the piece. They wanted to run it in their November issue with a cover line, "The untipped check, when heroes are human." The day Marcus got the acceptance email, he took Aaliyah out for dinner, real dinner, at a nice restaurant they couldn't usually afford. She was between chemo cycles and feeling relatively strong, her appetite finally returning. "I'm proud of you," she said over pasta neither of them had to cook. "You took something painful and turned it into something meaningful." "I had a good teacher," Marcus smiled at his sister. "You're the one who kept telling me both things could be true." "Well, cancer makes you wise." Aaliyah's smile was tired but genuine. That and having a brother who never gives up, even when things are impossible. "I learned that from watching you." Then we learned it from watching Jordan. And he learned something from us. It's all connected, pain and growth and people teaching each other how to be better. The piece published in early November. The response was immediate and divided, exactly as Marcus had expected. Some readers praised the nuance, the refusal to reduce Jordan to either hero or villain. Others accused Marcus of being too soft, of letting Jordan buy his way out of accountability. Still others said he was too hard, that everyone deserves grace when they're grieving. Marcus read every comment, every tweet, every email. And slowly he realized something. The division itself proved the point. People wanted simple stories, heroes or villains, good or bad. The truth was messier. The truth was that we're all capable of both generosity and cruelty, presence and absence, growth and failure. And that was okay. That was human. The publication led to more opportunities. NPR wanted Marcus for an interview. CBS Sunday Morning wanted to do a segment. Other publications wanted follow-up pieces. But the most meaningful response came from an email Marcus received 2 weeks after publication. It was from a woman named Patricia Green, the hotel housekeeper Jordan had helped with her daughter's medical bills. "Dear Marcus, thank you for writing this story. My daughter is healthy now, and that's partly because of Mr. Jordan's kindness years ago. But I've also seen him be thoughtless, not to me but to my coworkers. I never knew how to hold both truths. Your story showed me that I don't have to choose. I can be grateful for his help and disappointed in his failures. Both are real, both matter. Thank you for reminding us that people are complicated. We need more stories like this. Gratefully, Patricia." Marcus printed the email and pinned it above his desk. A reminder of why the hard stories mattered, why truth mattered even when it was complicated, especially when it was complicated. Winter came early to Chicago that year. By mid-November, the first snow had already fallen, covering the city in a white blanket that made everything look cleaner than it was. Marcus stood at the window of his apartment, watching flakes drift past the streetlights, and thought about how much had changed in 5 months. The Atlantic piece had been out for 3 weeks now, and the initial frenzy was finally settling. Marcus had done his interviews, responded to the most thoughtful criticism, and tried to ignore the rest. He'd learned quickly that engaging with every angry comment was a path to madness. Some people would always want simpler stories than the one he'd told. Behind him, Aaliyah was asleep on the couch, wrapped in 3 blankets despite the apartment's working heat. Her latest round of chemo had been particularly brutal, and she'd spent most of the past week either sleeping or fighting nausea. But Dr. Patel had given them good news at yesterday's appointment. The cancer was responding to treatment. Not gone, but shrinking. Progress measured in millimeters and percentages, but progress nonetheless. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from George Kohler. "Michael would like to invite you to something. Can you talk?" Marcus called him back immediately. "Marcus, good to hear from you," George said. "How's your sister?" "Hanging in there. Chemo's rough, but the treatment's working." "I'm glad to hear that. Listen, Michael has been working on something since your article came out, and he'd like you to be there when he announces it. Are you free this Saturday afternoon? What kind of announcement? He'll explain when you're there. 2 p.m. at the community center on South Racine. Can you make it? Marcus agreed, curiosity overriding his exhaustion. After hanging up, he Googled the address. It was a community center in Inglewood, one of Chicago's most economically challenged neighborhoods. What was Jordan planning? Saturday morning, Aaliyah insisted on coming with him despite Marcus's protests. "I'm not missing this," she said, pulling on her Bulls jersey over 2 layers of thermal shirts. "Michael Jordan personally invited my brother to something. I'm going even if you have to carry me." "You're supposed to be resting." "I'll rest tomorrow. Today, I'm going to find out what Michael Jordan has been up to." They took a cab. Marcus could afford cabs now with his savings from Jordan's check and the payment from the Atlantic. The community center was a squat brick building with bars on the windows and bright murals covering the exterior walls. A small crowd had already gathered outside despite the cold, maybe 50 people, mostly local residents and some media with cameras. George met them at the door. "Marcus, good to see you. And you must be Aaliyah." Aaliyah's eyes went wide. "You know who I am." "Michael talks about you quite a bit, says you're teaching him about real championship spirit." George smiled warmly. "Come on, he's inside." The interior of the community center had been transformed. What had probably been a rundown gym was now freshly painted, with new basketball hoops, refinished floors, and rows of chairs set up facing a small stage. Jordan stood near the stage talking to several people Marcus didn't recognize, community leaders from the look of them. Jordan spotted them and walked over immediately. He shook Marcus's hand, then turned to Aaliyah. "You must be the famous Aaliyah," he said. "I've heard a lot about you." Aaliyah couldn't speak. She just stared, tears already forming in her eyes. Jordan seemed to understand. He pulled a chair over for her. "Sit. Save your energy. We've got a long program ahead." He crouched down to her level. "Marcus tells me you're in the middle of treatment. How are you doing?" Aaliyah's voice cracked. "I'm fighting like you taught me." "Good, keep fighting. And remember what I said, champions aren't people who never fall down. They're people who get back up." More people filed in over the next 20 minutes. Marcus recognized Denise and her 3 kids, Jamie and Carlos from Giordano's, Thomas Brennan and Patricia Gomez, several other journalists, community members, service workers, a mix of people from different worlds all connected somehow to this moment. At 2 o'clock sharp, Jordan took the stage. The room quieted immediately. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Some of you know why you're here. Others are probably wondering what this is about. Let me explain." Jordan gestured around the renovated space. 5 months ago, a young man wrote me a letter. His name is Marcus Williams, and he's here today. Marcus served me dinner one night, and I failed him. Not intentionally, but I failed him nonetheless. I was dealing with personal pain that night, and in my pain, I became blind to the people around me. I didn't tip. I didn't acknowledge the service. I didn't see Marcus or his co-workers as people, just as obstacles between me and being alone with my grief." The room was silent except for camera shutters clicking. Marcus could have written an angry letter, could have gone to the press to embarrass me, could have made this about revenge or getting something from me. Instead, he wrote me a letter asking for understanding. Not money, not an apology, though he deserved one. Just understanding. He wanted to know why it happened. He wanted to see the full picture. Jordan's voice grew stronger. "That letter changed me. It showed me that my pain, however legitimate, had real consequences for real people. That my absence in that moment rippled outward, affecting Marcus, affecting his co-worker Denise, affecting people who depend on every dollar to survive. And it made me think about all the other times I'd been absent, all the other people I'd failed to see." He paused, scanning the crowd. So I started asking questions. How many times had I done this? How many people had I hurt without knowing? And more importantly, what could I do about it going forward? Jordan gestured to the people standing beside the stage. These are the directors of 10 community centers across Chicago. Centers that serve low-income neighborhoods, that provide after-school programs and job training and support for families struggling to get by. Many of these centers employ service workers, custodians, cafeteria workers, administrative staff, people who do essential work for wages that don't reflect their value. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He was beginning to understand where this was going. Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Second Look Foundation, Jordan said. This foundation will provide emergency assistance to service workers facing hardships, medical bills, rent, utilities, anything that creates crisis. It will also provide scholarships for service workers' children and job training for people trying to advance their careers. The foundation launches with $2 million in funding, and I'm committing to match any donations from others dollar for dollar up to $5 million more. The room erupted in applause. Jordan waited for it to quiet. But that's not all. This community center, he gestured around the renovated space, is the foundation's headquarters. It's been completely renovated and it will serve as a hub for services, a place where service workers can come for support, for training, for community. And it has a name. Jordan looked directly at Marcus. We're calling it the Marcus Williams Center for Service and Dignity, because Marcus showed me something crucial, that service work is dignified work, that the people who serve us deserve to be seen, and that understanding someone's pain doesn't mean excusing their impact. Marcus couldn't breathe. Aaliyah grabbed his hand and squeezed. Marcus, can you come up here? Jordan asked. Marcus stood on shaky legs and walked to the stage. The crowd was applauding again, but he barely heard it. Jordan put a hand on his shoulder. You wrote in your article that understanding doesn't erase consequences, Jordan said. You're right, but understanding can inspire change. Your letter inspired this. Your willingness to hold me accountable while offering grace, that's what made this possible. So thank you. Thank you for seeing me as human while reminding me to see others the same way. Jordan turned back to the crowd. The Second Look Foundation isn't about me trying to buy forgiveness. It's about addressing a pattern, my pattern of being absent when I should be present, and the larger pattern in our society of not valuing service workers the way we should. Marcus's story is one story, but there are thousands of stories like his. People working hard, living on the edge, one missed tip or unexpected expense away from crisis. This foundation is for all of them. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Marcus found himself surrounded by people, community leaders thanking him, service workers sharing their own stories, journalists asking for comments. It was overwhelming and beautiful and more than he'd ever imagined when he'd mailed that letter 5 months ago. Denise found him near the refreshment table. Trevor was with her, looking healthy, breathing easily. Did you know about this? She asked. I had no idea. George just said Jordan wanted to show me something. A whole foundation, a whole community center, named after you. Denise shook her head in wonder. That letter you wrote, it changed everything. It changed me too, Marcus said. I started out angry, looking for answers about why he failed me. I found answers, but I also found something bigger. A story about how we're all human, all failing and trying to do better. Thomas Brennan approached, his reporter's notebook in hand even at a reception. Hell of a story, Marcus. From a missed tip to a foundation. You're going to write about this, right? I don't know, it feels too personal now, like I'm too close to it. That's exactly why you should write it. You're not an observer anymore, you're a participant. And that makes the story more honest, not less. Brennan clapped him on the shoulder. Think about it. This is the follow-up your Atlantic piece deserves. Jordan found Marcus an hour later after most of the crowd had dispersed. Aaliyah had fallen asleep in a chair, exhausted but smiling. "Your sister made it through," Jordan said, sitting down beside Marcus. "She's tougher than she looks." "I can see that. She reminds me of my mother, that quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself." Jordan was quiet for a moment. "What did you think about the foundation?" "I think it's incredible. I think it's more than I ever imagined. I think," Marcus struggled to find words, "I think it shows that people can change, that accountability can lead to growth instead of just guilt." "That's what I'm hoping. But I also want you to know this isn't charity. This isn't me trying to make myself feel better or buy good publicity. This is about addressing a systemic problem that I've been part of. The way our society undervalues service work. The way people like me can hurt people like you without even noticing. It's going to help a lot of people. It's going to try, but I need people to understand something." Jordan turned to face Marcus directly. "This doesn't erase what happened that night. It doesn't make everything okay. The foundation isn't absolution. It's response. It's what I'm choosing to do with the understanding you gave me." Marcus thought about this. "You're right, it doesn't erase anything, but it does show that harm can lead to healing, that mistakes can inspire growth. That's worth something." "I hope so." Jordan stood. "Come on, let me show you the rest of the center." They walked through the facility. The gym with its new equipment, the computer lab for job training, the counseling offices, the daycare for workers' children. Every room was designed with the needs of service workers in mind. Jordan had clearly worked with people who understood the community, who knew what would actually help. In the main office, Jordan showed Marcus a wall of photographs. "We're going to document every person the foundation helps, not for publicity. These won't be public. But so we remember that behind every grant, every scholarship, every intervention, there's a person, a story, a life we had the chance to impact." The first photograph was already up. It showed Denise and her 3 children all smiling. Beneath it, a small plaque, "The Williams family, first recipients of Second Look Foundation Emergency Assistance." August 2024. Marcus felt his eyes burning. Williams. "You and Denise, the 2 people directly affected by my absence that night. You're the foundation's beginning, the reason it exists." Jordan pointed to the empty spaces on the wall. "But you won't be the last. This is just the start." They stood there for a long moment, looking at that photograph and the empty spaces waiting to be filled with more stories, more lives changed. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said finally. "Anything. Do you still have hard days? Days when you struggle to be present?" "All the time. Last week I had a terrible day. Business deal fell through, fought with my ex-wife about custody, felt like everything was falling apart. I went to dinner that night and the server asked how I was doing. And I realized I had a choice. I could be absent, let my pain blind me like it did that night at Giordano's, or I could be present, see the server as a person, respond with grace even when I felt graceless." "What did you do?" "I chose presence. Not because it was easy, but because I remembered what absence costs. I asked the server his name, asked about his day, left a generous tip, and afterward I felt better, not because I'd done something charitable, but because I'd connected with another human being, because I'd fought through my pain to see someone else's humanity." Jordan smiled. "That's what your letter taught me. That presence is a choice we have to make over and over, especially when we're hurting, and that the choice matters, not just for other people, but for ourselves." As the afternoon faded into evening, Marcus and Aaliyah prepared to leave. Jordan walked them out to their waiting cab. "Aaliyah," he said, "keep fighting. And when it gets hard, and I know it will, remember that champions get back up. Every time. I will. Aaliyah's voice was weak but determined. Thank you for everything, for the foundation, for seeing my brother, for showing us that people can grow. Thank you for sharing your brother with me. He changed my life. In the cab on the way home, Aaliyah leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder. That was the best day of my life, she whispered. Even better than the championship. Mine too. Are you going to write about this, the foundation? I don't know, maybe. It feels strange to write about something I'm part of. But that's the point, isn't it? You're not just observing anymore, you're living the story. That makes it more real, not less. Aaliyah closed her eyes, exhausted. Write it, Marcus. Write about how one letter changed everything, about how accountability and grace can coexist, about how people, even heroes, can grow. That night after Aaliyah was asleep, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with his notebook. He stared at the blank page for a long time, thinking about the past 5 months, about anger that became understanding, about hurt that inspired healing, about one missing tip that led to a foundation that would help thousands. He thought about Jordan's journey, from absence to presence, from blindness to seeing, from causing harm to addressing it. And his own journey, from victimhood to agency, from judgment to nuance, from pain to purpose. Finally, he began to write. 5 months ago, Michael Jordan didn't tip me. Today, he opened a community center in my name. This isn't a story about redemption, because that word is too simple for what happened. This is a story about complexity, about how people can fail and grow, hurt and heal, be absent and learn presence. It's also a story about what's possible when we hold people accountable while still seeing their humanity, when we demand better while understanding why they fell short, when we refuse to accept simple narratives about heroes and villains and insist on the messy, complicated truth. Michael Jordan isn't a hero who failed me. He isn't a villain who hurt me. He's a human being who was drowning in pain and failed to see the people around him, who then did the hard work of acknowledging that failure and changing because of it. And maybe that's what real heroism looks like. Not never falling, but getting back up. Not never hurting people, but taking responsibility when you do. Not being perfect, but being willing to grow. Marcus wrote through the night, the words flowing faster than they ever had. He wrote about the foundation's launch, about Denise's tears of gratitude, about Aaliyah's joy at meeting Jordan, about the wall of photographs waiting to be filled with stories of lives changed. He wrote about second chances and second looks, about how we're all one bad day away from being invisible to someone else and one conscious choice away from seeing them clearly. By morning, he had 15 pages of rough draft. It wasn't polished, wasn't ready for publication, but it was true. And truth was what mattered. Aaliyah found him still at the table at 7 a.m., surrounded by crumpled papers and empty coffee cups. You wrote all night. I couldn't stop. The story it poured out. She read over his shoulder for a few minutes, then smiled. It's good, Marcus. Really good, because it's honest. You're not pretending to be objective. You're not hiding your part in the story. You're just telling the truth about what happened and what it meant. You think people will care. The Atlantic piece was already a big story. Is there room for a follow-up? People will care because this isn't just about Jordan anymore. It's about what's possible when someone takes accountability seriously. When they don't just apologize but change. That's a story people need right now. She was right. In a world full of public apologies that meant nothing, of celebrities saying sorry without changing behavior, Jordan's response was different. He hadn't just said sorry. He'd asked why. He'd listened to the answer. And he'd built something meaningful in response. That was worth writing about. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus refined the piece. He interviewed the foundation's board members, the community center directors, several service workers who'd already received assistance. He documented the foundation's structure, its goals, its funding model. He sent a draft to Jordan for fact-checking. Jordan called him 2 days later. "It's perfect," Jordan said. "You're not letting me off easy, you're clear about what I did wrong and why it mattered. But you're also showing that people can grow, that mistakes can become catalysts for change. That's the story worth telling." The piece published in The Atlantic's February issue under the headline, "The Second Look: How One Missed Tip Became a Foundation for Change." The response was different this time, less divided. More people seemed ready to accept that both things could be true, that Jordan had failed and that he'd grown from that failure. That accountability and grace weren't opposites but partners in the work of becoming better. Marcus received hundreds of emails. Many were from service workers sharing their own stories of being invisible, of being hurt by thoughtless customers, of struggling to survive on wages that didn't reflect their worth. Others were from people who recognized themselves in Jordan, people who'd been absent when they should have been present, who'd hurt others without meaning to, who were trying to do better. One email stood out. It was from a man named David Green, who'd been a server at a restaurant in New York where Jordan had once been cruel to a young employee. "Dear Marcus, I read both your articles. I was the manager who witnessed Michael Jordan make one of my servers cry back in 1994. That server quit the next day. Said if that's how people treated him in this job, it wasn't worth it. I've carried anger about that for 26 years. Anger at Jordan for his cruelty. Anger at myself for not standing up for my employee. Anger at a system that lets wealthy people treat service workers like they're disposable." Your articles didn't erase that anger, but they complicated it. They showed me that Jordan, like all of us, contains multitudes, that he's capable of cruelty and kindness, absence and presence, failure and growth. More importantly, they showed me that my anger doesn't have to define the story, that I can hold Jordan accountable for his past behavior while also acknowledging his present growth. Both things can be true. Thank you for that. Thank you for refusing to write either a hit piece or a puff piece. Thank you for insisting on the messy, complicated truth. Sincerely, David. Marcus printed that email and added it to the wall above his desk, next to Patricia Green's letter. Reminders that the complicated stories mattered most. That truth was worth pursuing even when, especially when, it refused to be simple. Spring came slowly to Chicago, melting the snow inch by stubborn inch. Aaliyah's health continued to improve. The foundation served its 100th family. Marcus graduated with honors, his thesis, an expanded version of his Jordan articles, earning praise from the journalism department. And through it all, Marcus kept writing, stories about complexity, about people failing and growing, about the space between who we are and who we're becoming. Because he'd learned something from his strange journey with Michael Jordan. The best stories aren't about heroes or villains. They're about humans trying to do better, one choice at a time. And that was heroic enough. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late April, 6 months after the foundation's launch. Marcus was at his new desk at the Chicago Tribune. They'd hired him as a staff writer immediately after graduation, working on a piece about public school funding when his phone buzzed. George Kohler. Marcus answered immediately. "George, what's up?" "Marcus, I have a situation I need your help with." George's voice was tight, controlled, but Marcus could hear the stress underneath. "Can you meet me at Northwestern Memorial in 30 minutes? It's urgent." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Is it Jordan? Is he okay?" "He's fine, it's not about him. I'll explain when you get here. 4th floor, oncology wing." Oncology wing. Marcus's blood turned cold. "I'll be there in 20. He grabbed his jacket and told his editor he had a family emergency. Not entirely a lie, since the foundation had become something like family over the past months. The cab ride to Northwestern felt endless, his mind racing through possibilities. Who from the foundation was in the hospital? Had something happened to one of the families they'd helped? George was waiting in the fourth-floor hallway, looking more disheveled than Marcus had ever seen him. His tie was loose, his usually perfect hair mussed. "Thank you for coming so quickly," George said, shaking Marcus's hand. "I'm sorry for the cryptic call, but I didn't want to explain over the phone." "What's going on?" "Come with me." George led him down the hallway to a private waiting room. Inside, Michael Jordan sat with his head in his hands. He looked up when they entered, and Marcus saw that his eyes were red. "Marcus," Jordan said, his voice rough, "I'm sorry to pull you away from work, but I didn't know who else to call who would understand." "Understand what?" "Michael, what happened?" Jordan gestured to the chair across from him. Marcus sat, his heart pounding. "There's a woman here, Patricia Monroe. She's 47 years old, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She has maybe 2 weeks left." Jordan's voice cracked. "She was a server at a restaurant I went to in 1995. I was having a terrible day, lost a playoff game, was dealing with contract negotiations. My head was somewhere else. She spilled water on me by accident. Just a mistake." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I screamed at her in front of the whole restaurant, made her cry, got her fired." Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. "Oh no." "Her daughter contacted the foundation last week, said her mother was dying and had one request. She wanted to know if I remembered that night, if I ever thought about what I did to her." Jordan looked at Marcus with desperate eyes. "I didn't remember, not until she described it. Then it came flooding back, her face, her tears, walking out feeling justified because she'd ruined my suit, not thinking about it again until now." "Where is she?" "Room 447. She's weak, in and out of consciousness. Her daughter, her name is Lisa, she's been so kind. Said her mother doesn't want an apology, doesn't want money. She just wants to know if I remember. If that moment that ruined her life registered at all in mine." George spoke up. "Marcus, Michael called you because of what you wrote, about accountability and presence, about seeing people. He wants to do this right, but he doesn't know how. How do you apologize to a dying woman for something you did 29 years ago?" Marcus thought about his own journey, about the letter he'd written, about the conversation that followed. "You tell the truth. You acknowledge what you did and the impact it had. You don't make excuses, and you let her respond however she needs to." "What if she hates me? What if seeing me makes it worse?" "That's her right. But she asked to see you, which means she needs something from this conversation. Your job is to give her what she needs, not to make yourself feel better." Jordan nodded slowly. "Will you come with me? I know it's asking a lot, but I need someone there who understands both sides of this. Someone who won't let me hide from the truth." Marcus thought about Aaliyah, about Denise, about all the people who'd been made invisible by someone else's pain. "Okay, I'll come." They walked down the hallway together, George staying behind in the waiting room. Room 447 was at the end of the corridor, its door slightly ajar. Marcus could hear the beep of monitors, the hiss of oxygen. Jordan knocked softly. "Ms. Monroe, it's Michael Jordan. Your daughter said you wanted to see me." A woman's voice, weak but clear, "Come in." The room was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. Patricia Monroe lay in the hospital bed, thin and pale, an oxygen cannula in her nose. Her daughter Lisa sat beside her, holding her hand. Lisa was maybe Marcus's age, with her mother's eyes and a wariness that came from protecting someone you loved. "Mr. Jordan," Patricia said, "thank you for coming." Jordan moved closer to the bed, and Marcus hung back near the door, trying to be present but unobtrusive. "Ms. Monroe, I'm so sorry. About what happened to you. About what I did." Patricia studied him for a long moment. "Do you remember?" I do now. Your daughter reminded me of the details, and then I remembered. The restaurant, the water, my reaction. Jordan's voice was steady but strained. I have no excuse. I was angry about other things and I took it out on you. That was wrong, inexcusably wrong. I lost my job that day, Patricia said. The manager said I was incompetent, that if I couldn't handle serving without spilling drinks, I should find another line of work. I had a 6-month-old baby at home. I was living paycheck to paycheck. It took me 3 months to find another job. We almost lost our apartment. Lisa squeezed her mother's hand, tears running down her face. I didn't know, Jordan said quietly, but I should have thought about it. Should have realized that my actions had consequences beyond my momentary anger. I've thought about that night for 29 years, Patricia continued. Every time someone treated me badly at work, every rude customer, every person who snapped at me, I thought about you. About how even Michael Jordan, someone I admired, someone who seemed to represent excellence and dignity, saw me as less than human, as someone who deserved to be humiliated for a simple mistake. Jordan flinched. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't ask you here for an apology. Patricia's voice was getting weaker, the effort of talking clearly exhausting her. I asked you here because I'm dying, and I wanted to know something before I go. Did it matter? Did that moment register with you at all? Or was I just another invisible person you hurt and forgot about? Marcus watched Jordan struggle with the question. The easy answer would be a lie, to say of course he remembered, of course it mattered, but Patricia deserved truth. It didn't matter to me then, Jordan said finally. I forgot about it almost immediately. Went on with my life, with my career, with being Michael Jordan. And that's the shame of it. That moment defined part of your life, caused you real harm, and I forgot it happened. I didn't see you as a person. I saw you as an inconvenience. And that's on me. Patricia nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. Thank you. Thank you for admitting that, for not pretending it mattered when it didn't. But it matters now, Jordan continued. Not because that makes it better, but because someone helped me learn to see people, to understand that my pain doesn't give me license to be blind to others. I'm trying to do better. I've started a foundation to help service workers because I finally understood how much harm I've caused by not seeing people like you. Lisa told me about the foundation, the Marcus Williams Center. Patricia looked at Marcus for the first time. Are you him? Are you Marcus? Marcus stepped forward. Yes, ma'am. Jordan hurt you too. In a different way, but yes. And you forgave him. Marcus chose his words carefully. I don't know if forgive is the right word. I understood him better. I saw that he was human, capable of both great kindness and great thoughtlessness. And I watched him try to do better after he understood the harm he'd caused. That mattered to me. Patricia turned back to Jordan. I don't forgive you. I can't. That night changed my life, made me feel small for decades. But I'm glad you're trying to do better. I'm glad my daughter showed me those articles about you and Marcus, about how you're helping people now. It doesn't undo what happened to me, but maybe it prevents it from happening to someone else. That's all I can hope for, Jordan said. That I learn from my failures, that I don't keep making the same mistakes. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 29 years hanging in the air between them. Can I do anything for you? Jordan asked. For your family. Your daughter mentioned medical bills. We're okay, Lisa interrupted. The foundation already helped us. When we reached out, they covered Mom's hospice care costs. We didn't know it was your foundation until after. Jordan looked at George, who'd quietly entered the room. George nodded confirmation. I'm glad, Jordan said. I'm glad we could help, even if it doesn't undo the past. Patricia's eyes were starting to close, exhaustion winning out. Thank you for coming. for remembering, for seeing me now even if you didn't then. Thank you for teaching me something I should have learned decades ago, that every person I encounter has a life as complex as mine, struggles as real as mine, dignity as deserving of respect as mine. They left quietly, Lisa walking them to the door. In the hallway, she grabbed Jordan's hand. "Thank you," she said. She needed that. She needed to be seen by you finally. It won't heal everything, but it's something. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry it took her dying for me to see her. Better late than never, Lisa said, though her voice carried the weight of all the years her mother had waited. In the elevator down, Jordan was silent. Marcus watched him, seeing the struggle on his face, guilt and regret, and the painful recognition of harm that couldn't be undone. "I thought I was doing better," Jordan said finally. "I thought the foundation, the changes I've made, I thought that meant I'd addressed it. But there are people like Patricia everywhere. People I hurt years ago who are still carrying that pain. How do I address that?" "You can't find them all," Marcus said. "But you can keep trying, keep being present, keep seeing people. And when someone like Patricia finds you, you show up. You tell the truth. You don't hide from what you did." They reached the ground floor. George excused himself to make some calls, leaving Marcus and Jordan standing in the hospital lobby. "You want to get coffee?" Jordan asked. "I don't want to be alone with this right now." They found a small cafe near the hospital. Jordan ordered for both of them, then paused at the register and asked the barista her name. "Emma," she said, looking surprised. "Thanks, Emma, appreciate what you do." Jordan left a $20 tip on a $12 order. At their table, Jordan stared into his coffee. "I do that now, ask names, leave big tips, try to see people. But does it count if I'm doing it because I learned a lesson, because I'm trying to make up for the past? Why does the motivation matter if the action is right? Because it feels performative, like I'm doing it to make myself feel better, not because I genuinely see people as humans worthy of respect." Marcus thought about this. Maybe at first it's conscious. Maybe you have to think about it, remind yourself, make it a practice. But over time, it becomes who you are. The performance becomes genuine. "You sound like your sister." Marcus smiled. "She's rubbing off on me. How is she, by the way? George mentioned she had an appointment yesterday." "Clean scans. The cancer's in full remission." Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes. "Dr. Patel says if she makes it 6 more months clear, her odds of long-term survival go way up." "Marcus, that's incredible. I'm so happy for you both." They sat with that good news for a moment, a counterweight to the heaviness of Patricia's situation. "Life's strange," Jordan said. "Aaliyah's cancer goes into remission the same week I meet a woman dying from cancer that I treated terribly decades ago. Both things existing at once, joy and sorrow, healing and dying, growth and regret." "Both things can be true," Marcus said. "That's what we keep learning, isn't it? That life isn't either or, it's all of it all at once." They talked for another hour. About Patricia, about the foundation, about Aaliyah's remission, about the weight of public life and private failure, about learning to be present even when, especially when, it was hard. Finally, Jordan checked his watch. "I should let you get back to work. Thank you for coming today, for being there, for helping me do that right." "I think you did it right on your own. You showed up. You told the truth. You didn't hide from what you'd done. Because you taught me how. That letter you wrote, it started all of this. You showed me it was possible to hold someone accountable while seeing their humanity. That's what I tried to do with Patricia today." Walking back to the Tribune offices, Marcus thought about the strange path his life had taken. From one missed tip to a foundation serving hundreds of families. From anger at a thoughtless celebrity to understanding a complicated human being. From being invisible to being seen and learning to see others in return. That evening, Marcus visited Aaliyah at their apartment. She was cooking dinner, actually cooking, not just heating up soup, which was a sign of how much better she felt. "You're in a weird mood," she observed, stirring pasta sauce. "What happened?" Marcus told her about Patricia, about the hospital visit, about Jordan's struggle with a harm that couldn't be undone. "That's heavy," Aaliyah said. "How's Jordan handling it?" "As well as he can. But I think it reminded him that growth doesn't erase the past, that doing better now doesn't undo the harm he caused then." "That must be hard to carry." "It is, but maybe that's part of growth, carrying the weight of what you did wrong while still trying to do right. Not using the past as an excuse to give up, but using it as motivation to be better." Aaliyah plated pasta and they sat at their small kitchen table. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "I'm glad you wrote those articles. I'm glad you pursued this story even though it was hard and personal and complicated. Because look what it became. A foundation helping people, Jordan learning to be more present, you finding your voice as a writer. All of that came from one bad moment." "That's the thing about bad moments," Marcus said. "They don't have to define the story. They can be the beginning of the story, the catalyst for growth." "Exactly. My cancer, that was a bad moment. Actually, a lot of bad moments. But it also taught us about resilience and fighting and what matters. It didn't have to be only bad. It could also be the thing that made us stronger." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the spring evening darkening outside their window. "Jordan asked me something today," Marcus said. "He asked if growth counts if you only start growing after you get caught, if trying to do better is genuine when it comes from getting called out." "What did you tell him?" "That intention matters less than action. That even if you start doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, over time it becomes who you are." "Do you believe that?" Marcus thought carefully. "I think I do. Jordan didn't choose to learn this lesson. I forced it on him by writing that letter, but he could have ignored it. He could have sent some money and moved on. Instead, he did the work, changed his behavior, built something meaningful. That choice matters, even if he wouldn't have made it without being pushed." "So people can change," Aaliyah said. "Even when they don't want to, even when they're forced to face themselves, they can still choose to grow from it." "Yeah, they can." A week later, Marcus received a call from Lisa Monroe. Her mother had died peacefully, surrounded by family. Before she passed, she'd asked Lisa to tell Jordan something. "She said to tell him thank you," Lisa said, her voice thick with grief. She said that conversation gave her something she didn't know she needed, the knowledge that she'd been seen finally, that her hurt had registered, that she mattered. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Marcus said. "Thank you, and Marcus, thank you for whatever you did to help Jordan become someone who could have that conversation, who could show up and tell the truth and not hide from what he'd done. My mother carried that pain for 29 years. Letting it go, even partially, gave her peace at the end. That's a gift." After the call, Marcus sat at his desk and stared at his computer screen. He had a story to write, not for publication, but for himself. A way to process what he'd witnessed, what he'd learned, what it all meant. He typed, "Patricia Monroe died last Tuesday, carrying a hurt that Michael Jordan inflicted 29 years ago. But in her final days, she also carried something else. The knowledge that she had been seen, that her pain had been acknowledged, that she mattered. This isn't a redemption story. Jordan's growth doesn't undo the decades Patricia spent feeling small. His foundation doesn't erase the job she lost, the struggles she faced, the ways one thoughtless moment rippled through her life. But it is a story about the possibility of change, about how people who cause harm can learn to do better, about how accountability and growth can coexist, about how it's never too late to see someone, even if you're 29 years too late to undo the harm. Patricia didn't forgive Jordan. She didn't have to, but she gave him something valuable anyway, the chance to be present for her finally, to see her, acknowledge her, and let her know she mattered. And maybe that's what healing looks like. Not perfect, not complete, but real. A dying woman getting to be seen by the person who once made her invisible. A person who caused harm finally understanding its weight. A small moment of acknowledgement after decades of absence. Both things can be true. Jordan caused harm that couldn't be undone, and he's trying to do better now. Patricia carried pain until she died, and she found some peace in being seen. The foundation helps hundreds of people, and it doesn't erase the hundreds more who were hurt before it existed. Life is complicated. People are complicated. And that's okay. We don't need simple stories about heroes and villains. We need honest stories about humans trying, failing, learning, and trying again. That's heroic enough. Marcus saved the document but didn't publish it. Some stories were just for understanding, not for sharing. Some lessons were private. But he'd learned something from Patricia's death, something that would stay with him. It's never too late to see someone. Never too late to acknowledge harm. Never too late to be present. Even if you're decades too late to undo the damage. Even if all you can offer is the simple recognition that they mattered. Sometimes that's enough. Not to erase the past, but to honor it. To say, I see you now. I'm sorry I didn't see you then. You deserved better. And in that acknowledgement, maybe there was healing. Not perfect healing, not complete healing, but real. And real was enough. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning in early October, nearly 16 months after Marcus had served Michael Jordan at Giordano's. It was hand-delivered to the Tribune offices, marked personal and confidential in George Kohler's precise handwriting. Marcus opened it at his desk, curious. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a note from George. Marcus, Michael needs to see you today. It's urgent and important. Can you come to the office at 3 p.m.? He has something to tell you that will change your understanding of everything. Please come alone. You'll understand why after. George. Marcus stared at the note, his journalist's instincts firing. Something to tell him that would change his understanding of everything. What could be more revealing than what Jordan had already shared? He texted George, I'll be there. The day crawled by. Marcus tried to focus on the piece he was writing about education reform, but his mind kept drifting. What could Jordan possibly need to tell him? Had something happened with the foundation? Was there another Patricia Monroe situation? At 2:45, Marcus left the office and took a cab to the downtown building where he'd first met with Jordan 16 months ago. George was waiting in the lobby, looking more serious than Marcus had ever seen him. Thank you for coming quickly, George said, leading him to the elevator. What Michael's going to tell you. It's something he's never told anyone outside of his immediate family and legal team. He wants you to know because of what you've written, because of how you've told this story. George, you're scaring me. I'm not trying to, but this is big, Marcus. This is the missing piece that explains everything. They rode the elevator in silence. In the conference room, Jordan stood at the window overlooking the city, his posture tense. He turned when they entered. Marcus, thank you for coming. Jordan gestured to the chairs. Please sit. George, you can stay. They sat. Jordan remained standing, pacing slightly, his hands clasped behind his back. I've read everything you've written, Jordan began. The Atlantic pieces, the follow-ups, the profile you did on the foundation last month. They're all honest, fair, complex. You've told the story of my failures and my attempts to grow without making me a villain or a saint. That takes courage. Thank you, but let me finish, please. Jordan stopped pacing and faced Marcus directly. You've written about that night at Giordano's, about my father's appeal hearing, about the context of my grief. But there's something you don't know. Something I haven't told anyone publicly because of legal restrictions that only lifted last week. Marcus pulled out his notebook instinctively. Jordan nodded. "Go ahead, write this down. You're going to want to." Jordan sat down across from Marcus, his expression grave. "You wrote that the appeal hearing on June 14, 1998, was about Daniel Green seeking to overturn his conviction for my father's murder. That's true. What you didn't know, what couldn't be reported at the time, was what the new evidence actually showed." Marcus's pen hovered over paper. "The evidence suggested there was a third person involved in my father's murder, someone who was never caught, never charged. The judge ruled the evidence wasn't strong enough to overturn the convictions, but—" Jordan's voice cracked slightly. "But it was real enough to warrant an FBI investigation." "I know this part," Marcus said gently. "You told me in our first meeting. You know there was an investigation. You don't know what it found." Jordan took a breath. 2 months ago, August 16, 2025, the FBI arrested someone, Raymond Howard. He was a third person involved in my father's murder. He'd been free for 32 years. Marcus's hand froze. "Oh my God." "The DNA evidence that came up in the 1998 appeal, it was his. The FBI spent 7 years building a case. They finally got him." Jordan's eyes were wet. "And here's the part that's going to change your understanding of that night at Giordano's." Jordan stood and walked back to the window, his back to Marcus. "The appeal hearing on June 14, 1998, the day I came to your restaurant, that wasn't just difficult because I had to relive my father's murder. It was difficult because the lawyers told us about this third person, told us there might be someone else out there who'd helped kill my father, someone who'd been walking free while Daniel Green and Larry Demery sat in prison, someone who might never be caught." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "I sat in that courtroom," Jordan continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I heard that somewhere out there was a person who'd helped murder my father, who'd gotten away with it, who might be living a normal life, going to work, raising a family, sleeping peacefully, while my father was in the ground, and there was nothing I could do about it. No way to find him, no way to get justice." Jordan turned back to face Marcus. "That's where my head was when I walked into your restaurant, not just grieving my father, drowning in the knowledge that his murder wasn't fully solved. That justice was incomplete. That someone was out there free, having taken my father from me and faced no consequences." "Michael," Marcus said softly, "for 7 years I carried that, every day wondering if this person would ever be caught, if I'd ever know the full truth, if my father would ever really get justice." Jordan's voice grew stronger. "And then 2 months ago they arrested him. Raymond Howard, he confessed. The case is closed, finally truly closed." The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. "That's why you wanted to meet today?" Marcus asked. "To tell me this?" "To tell you this and to tell you what I've been thinking about since the arrest." Jordan sat back down. "For 7 years I've been on this journey you documented, learning to be present, learning to see people, building the foundation, trying to be better. And I always thought I was doing it because of your letter, because you held me accountable. You were. But I also think," Jordan paused, choosing his words carefully, "I think part of why your letter hit me so hard was because of what I was carrying. The knowledge that someone who'd hurt me had gotten away with it. That justice was incomplete. And then you wrote me a letter saying I'd hurt you and Denise and others. That my pain, however legitimate, had caused real harm that I needed to acknowledge." Marcus began to understand. "You saw the parallel." "Exactly. I was angry that someone who'd hurt me wasn't being held accountable. And then you showed me that I was doing the same thing, hurting people without being held accountable. Your letter made me realize that if I wanted justice for my father, I needed to offer justice to the people I'd hurt. That accountability couldn't be something I demanded from others but didn't give myself. Jordan leaned forward. Does that make sense? Am I explaining this right? You're saying my letter helped you see that you couldn't demand accountability for your father's killers, while refusing to be accountable for your own actions. Yes, exactly that. Your letter showed me the hypocrisy of my position, demanding justice while causing injustice, wanting to be seen in my pain while making others invisible in theirs. Marcus wrote furiously, his mind racing. This was the missing piece, the full context he'd never had. So when Raymond Howard was arrested, Jordan continued, and I finally got the justice I'd been desperate for, I thought about you, about Patricia Monroe, about Denise and her son, about everyone I'd hurt while I was drowning in the injustice done to me, and I realized something. What? Getting justice for my father didn't heal me, didn't make me whole, didn't undo the harm I'd caused while I was in pain. All it did was close one wound while revealing others, all the wounds I'd inflicted on people who were just trying to do their jobs, live their lives, survive their own pain. Jordan's voice was thick with emotion now. The arrest should have felt like victory, like closure, and in some ways it did, but mostly it felt like, he struggled for words, like a reckoning, like the universe saying, okay, you got your justice. Now what are you going to do about the justice you owe others? Marcus set down his pen. How did you feel when they arrested him? Relief, anger, grief all over again, and guilt. Jordan wiped his eyes. Guilt that I'd spent 7 years so consumed by my need for justice that I'd become unjust myself, that I'd hurt people like you and Patricia because I was drowning in my own pain. But you didn't know about Raymond Howard when you started the foundation, when you met with Patricia, when you've been trying to do better. No, but I knew there was someone out there who'd hurt me and gotten away with it. And I hated that. I obsessed over it. And your letter made me see that I was doing the same thing to others, hurting them and walking away, making them invisible, getting away with it because I'm Michael Jordan and nobody held me accountable. George spoke for the first time. What Michael's trying to say is that the arrest changed his understanding of these past 16 months, made him realize that his journey toward accountability wasn't just about your letter. It was about finally understanding, really understanding, what it means to be the person who causes harm versus the person who receives it. Jordan nodded. For 7 years, I was the victim. Someone had hurt me and escaped justice. And then you wrote me a letter reminding me that I was also the perpetrator, that I'd hurt people and escaped accountability. Both things were true. I was victim and victimizer, hurt and harmful, deserving justice and owing justice. Both things can be true, Marcus said quietly. Yes, that's what I've learned from you, from your sister, from this whole journey, that we can hold multiple truths simultaneously, that I can be legitimately hurt by my father's murder and still be responsible for the hurt I caused others, that getting justice doesn't exempt me from giving justice, that my pain doesn't erase my responsibility. Jordan stood and walked to a cabinet in the corner of the room. He pulled out a folder and brought it back to the table. These are letters, he said, 37 of them, letters I've written to people I hurt over the years, servers I was rude to, hotel staff I dismissed, people I made invisible because I was too consumed by my own life to see them. Some I've sent, some I'm still trying to find addresses for, some are to people who have died like Patricia. Marcus opened the folder. Page after page of handwritten letters, each one beginning with "I'm writing to apologize," or "I need to tell you," or "I've been thinking about." This is extraordinary, Marcus said. It's necessary. After Raymond Howard was arrested, I realized that if I wanted peace, real peace, I needed to do more than just run a foundation. I needed to personally account for every person I could remember hurting, every moment when I was the person who caused pain and walked away. Jordan pulled out another document. And this is the other thing I wanted to show you. It was a legal document dense with text. Marcus scanned it, his eyes widening as he understood what he was reading. You're giving away the foundation, Marcus looked up, shocked. Not giving it away, restructuring it so I'm not in control, making it independent, run by a board of directors that includes service workers, community leaders, and people who have been harmed by wealth inequality. I'm still funding it, but I'm removing myself from decision-making because I realize something else. What? That the foundation can't be about me, can't be about my redemption or my growth or my learning to be better. It has to be about the people it serves, about centering their experiences, their needs, their dignity. And as long as I'm in charge, it's still about me in some way. Marcus felt tears in his eyes. This was beyond anything he'd expected. When did you decide this? The day Raymond Howard was arrested. I got the call from the FBI and my first feeling was relief. My second was emptiness. Like I'd been chasing this thing for 7 years, and now that I had it, I didn't know what to do with it. And then I thought about what you wrote in that follow-up piece, about how accountability isn't a destination, it's a practice. Something you do every day, not something you achieve once and then you're done. I remember writing that. It changed how I thought about everything. Made me realize that even after Raymond Howard was caught, even after I got my justice, I still had work to do, still had people to account to, still had pain I'd caused that needed addressing. The work doesn't end, it evolves. George cleared his throat. Marcus, Michael wanted you to know all of this because he's planning to go public with it. The arrest of Raymond Howard is going to be news, major news. And when that happens, Michael wants to tell the full story. About how the incomplete justice in his father's case affected him for 7 years. About how your letter made him realize he needed to offer others the accountability he demanded for himself. About how getting justice finally made him understand what he owed others. You want me to write it, Marcus said, understanding. I want you to have the opportunity to write it, if you want to. Jordan met his eyes. You're the only journalist who's told this story with full honesty, who hasn't tried to make me look better or worse than I am, who's understood that people are complicated and that both things can be true. If anyone's going to tell this final chapter, it should be you. Marcus thought about everything he'd written over the past 16 months, the articles that had launched his career, the relationships he'd built with Jordan, with the foundation, with the community they served, the ways this story had changed his understanding of accountability, grace, justice, and growth. This changes the whole narrative, Marcus said slowly. Everything I've written has been about you learning from one mistake, the night you didn't tip me, but this is bigger. This is about 7 years of carrying incomplete justice and how that shaped everything. How your pain about your father connected to the pain you caused others. Exactly, and I didn't want to tell you this before because legally I couldn't. The investigation was ongoing. But now that Raymond Howard has been arrested and has confessed, I can talk about it. And I want to, because I think it's the missing piece of the story. Marcus closed his notebook. His mind was racing, already structuring the piece, seeing how this revelation reframed everything. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Anything. The night you came to Giordano's, June 14th, 1998, you just learned about the third person, about Raymond Howard, though you didn't know his name yet. You knew someone who'd hurt you was out there free, and you couldn't do anything about it. Yes. And then you sat at my table, and I was just trying to do my job, serve you well, earn a tip to help pay my bills and support my sister. And you couldn't see me. You were so buried in your own injustice that I became invisible. Yes, And then I wrote you a letter 16 months ago, holding you accountable for making me invisible. And that letter helped you see the connection, that you were demanding visibility for your pain while making others invisible in theirs. Yes, Jordan's voice was barely a whisper. And now, 7 years after that night, they've finally arrested the man who hurt you. You finally got justice. And getting that justice made you realize that justice isn't just something you receive, it's something you owe. Jordan nodded, tears streaming down his face now. I spent 7 years demanding accountability for someone who hurt me, and it took your letter to make me realize I needed to be accountable for the people I'd hurt, that I couldn't demand justice without giving justice, that my pain didn't make me special, it made me responsible for understanding others' pain. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a final piece of understanding clicking into place. This wasn't just a story about a celebrity learning to be better. This was a story about the fundamental reciprocity of justice, about how we can't demand accountability from those who hurt us while refusing to be accountable for the hurt we cause. This is going to be the most important thing I've ever written, Marcus said quietly. I know. That's why I wanted to tell you in person. Why I wanted you to have time to process it before it becomes public news. Jordan wiped his eyes. The FBI is holding a press conference next Wednesday to announce Howard's arrest and confession. That's when this becomes public. I wanted you to know first so you could think about how to tell the full story. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of revelation settling over them. Can I tell you something? Marcus said finally. Of course. When I wrote that first letter to you, I was angry, hurt. I wanted answers, maybe even wanted you to suffer a little for what you'd done to me and Denise. But writing your story, watching your growth, documenting your journey, it changed me too. It taught me that judgment is easy and understanding is hard, that everyone's carrying pain we can't see, that the people who hurt us are usually people who are hurting. That's what I learned from you, Jordan said. That understanding doesn't erase harm, but it transforms how we carry it, that we can hold people accountable while seeing their humanity, that both things can be true. Marcus smiled through his own tears. My sister's going to love this. She's been saying both things can be true for 16 months. She'll be thrilled to know she was right all along. How is Aaliyah? 6 months clear, still in remission, still fighting, still the wisest person I know. Tell her something for me. What? Tell her that getting justice for my father finally, after 32 years, taught me what she's been saying all along, that we can be hurt and be healing, can be victims and agents of change, can carry pain and still choose to be present, that both things are always true, all the time for everyone. George stood. Marcus, I'll send you all the FBI documents once they're public. Court filings, arrest records, everything you'll need for the article. Michael will make himself available for as many interviews as you need. Full transparency like always. Thank you. Marcus gathered his things, his mind already spinning with how to tell this story. Michael, can I ask one more thing? Anything. Do you wish you'd known about Raymond Howard earlier? Do you wish they'd caught him years ago, before you hurt so many people? Jordan thought carefully. I wish my father's murder had never happened. I wish I hadn't spent 7 years carrying the weight of incomplete justice. But do I wish I'd been caught sooner so I wouldn't have hurt people? No, because that frames it wrong, like the only reason not to hurt people is if you get caught. The lesson isn't don't hurt people because you might face consequences. It's don't hurt people because they're people, because they matter, because their pain is as real as yours. So you're saying the journey matters, the learning, even if it came from being forced to face yourself. Exactly. I didn't choose to learn this lesson. You forced it on me with your letter. but I chose what to do with that forcing, chose to listen instead of dismiss, chose to grow instead of defend, chose to build something instead of just apologize. That choice matters, even if I wouldn't have made it without being pushed. Marcus stood. I'm going to write something true and complicated and honest. Something that shows all of this. The pain you carried, the pain you caused, the justice you sought, the justice you owe, the growth that's possible even when it's forced. All of it. That's all I ask. Tell the whole truth, even the parts that make me look bad, especially those parts. At the door, Marcus turned back. Thank you for trusting me with this, for giving me the chance to tell the full story. Thank you for making me see what I couldn't see, for holding me accountable while never making me less than human, for showing me that both things can be true, that I caused harm and that I can grow from it, that I demanded justice and that I owe justice, that I was drowning in pain and that pain didn't excuse making others invisible. Marcus walked out into the autumn evening, his mind racing with the story he had to write. The final piece of the puzzle, the revelation that reframed everything. He pulled out his phone and called Aaliyah. "Hey," she answered. "How was the mysterious meeting?" It was, Marcus paused, trying to find words. It was the missing piece, the thing that explains everything. Remember how we kept saying both things can be true? Of course. Well, Jordan just showed me the biggest both things can be true of all. He was seeking justice for his father while causing injustice to others. He was the victim demanding accountability while being the perpetrator who escaped it. Both things, true, at the same time, for 7 years. Oh wow, Aaliyah was quiet for a moment. That's the whole story, isn't it? That's what it's all been about. Yeah, and I get to write it. The final chapter. The truth about why that night at Giordano's happened, what it meant, and what it taught us all about justice and accountability and being human. When do I get to read it? Soon. I'm going to write it this weekend. It's going to be the best thing I've ever done. I can't wait. I'm proud of you, Marcus. You took one bad night and turned it into this incredible journey of understanding. We did that together. You're the one who kept reminding me that people are complicated, that both things can be true. That pain doesn't excuse harm, but it helps us understand it. Well, Aaliyah said, and Marcus could hear the smile in her voice. Cancer makes you wise. I keep telling you that. Marcus laughed, real laughter, the kind that releases tension and brings joy. Yeah, it really does. He walked home through the Chicago evening, past the restaurants where servers were working the dinner rush, past the people living their complicated lives, carrying their invisible pain, making their own mistakes and trying their own growth. And he thought about justice, how we seek it when we're hurt, how we owe it when we hurt others, how these two truths aren't contradictory but connected, how demanding accountability from those who harm us means nothing if we won't be accountable for the harm we cause. How Michael Jordan spent 7 years seeking justice for his father's murder while causing injustice to servers and housekeepers and people just trying to survive. How getting that justice finally taught him what justice meant, not just punishment for those who hurt us, but responsibility for those we hurt. How one missing tip led to a letter that led to a foundation that led to this final revelation that reframed everything. How sometimes the most important stories aren't about heroes or villains, but about humans learning the hardest lesson of all, that we're all victims and perpetrators, all hurt and harmful, all deserving justice and owing justice. Both things, always true, at the same time. And maybe, just maybe, that understanding was the only justice that really mattered. The kind that transforms pain into growth, harm into healing, blind absence into conscious presence. The kind that says, I see you now. I'm sorry I didn't see you then. I'm trying to do better. Not because I'm a hero, but because I'm human. And being human means carrying both truths, the harm we've suffered and the harm we've caused, and choosing every day to do better with that weight. That was the story Marcus would write, the whole complicated truth, and it would be enough. Michael Jordan and Marcus Williams showed us that heroes aren't people who never fail. They're people who face their failures, learn from them, and choose to grow. They showed us that both things can always be true, that we can be hurt and still heal, that we can demand justice while owing it, that understanding someone's pain doesn't erase the consequences of their actions. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Drop your location in the comments below. I always love seeing our global community come together over these powerful stories. If this story touched you, moved you, or taught you something about accountability and compassion, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these meaningful stories. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our deep dives into the real human stories behind the headlines. The complicated, messy, beautiful truths that remind us we're all just people trying to do better. Finally, if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone struggling with forgiveness, someone trying to understand how to hold people accountable while still seeing their humanity, or someone who just loves a well-told, true story, please share this video with them. Share it with your friends, your family, your community, because stories like this don't just entertain us, they change us. They remind us to see each other, to be present, to understand that everyone we meet is fighting battles we can't see. Let's spread that kindness. Let's spread that awareness. Let's choose to see each other. Thank you for listening. Until next time, remember, both things can always be true, and that's what makes us human.